I saw Wilson Contreras. I'm like, all right, yeah, good to see you. I saw him take BP, and he looks like a power-hitting first baseman. He no longer looks like a catcher at all. He looks like he's built to mash. And his initial BP, his live right now that he's currently taking, I know it might be a completely overreaction because it's only day one. He looks great. It's just the way the ball was coming off the bat during batting practice. It was loud. I remember Lars Nootbaar's head jerked up. He was, whoa. Like, it was a noticeable difference in terms of size and swing. I'm not sure how the Contreras to first base position is going to go, but I was talking to him earlier today, and he seems pretty confident. One thing I'm not concerned about, though, is his offense. He certainly looks like he is built to mash.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. That was Katie Wu on with us yesterday in response to the question that we asked Alex of, who's the guy in camp that has created some amount of buzz for him? As we are now just a couple of days into the full roster reporting for camp. Most of them have been there for a while down in Jupiter, but a few of them arrived recently, notably Nolan Arenado being a part of that group. And so she said, hey, it's Wilson Contreras. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. He looks like a power-hitting first baseman. Buster Olney earlier today put out his release of the top 10 first basemen in Major League Baseball. I was curious, where is Wilson Contreras on this list? Is he a part of it just yet? I could have understood if he said, hey, this time next year, similar to what he said about Ivan Herrera, he'll be on the top 10 first baseman, but I want to see it with my own eyes first to find out if he could do it capably. Number 1 on his list, Freddie Freeman. Number 2, Bryce Harper. These make sense to me. Vlad Guerrero Jr. 3, Matt Olson 4, Pete Alonso 5, Christian Walker 6, Luis Ariz 7, and then Wilson Contreras at 8. I totally understand if Wilson Contreras is the guy that you're most excited to see during spring training to find out, A, how the swing looks, and B, how he looks defensively at first base. That's a more than understandable answer to the question of who is the Cardinal you're most excited to see. But Alex, if I asked you that question, what would be your answer this spring? Who's the guy that you want to see to find out, okay, what's this going to look like during the regular season?
It would be nobody on the Major League roster. And here's why, because I think we always argue about this. T-Bone gets super excited in spring training after he sees one at bat,
and then the T-Bone bring back the T-Bone 3 for every game.
40 home runs for Nolan Gorman.
That's a lot of work, though.
I don't buy into the spring training, just like I don't buy into preseason in hockey, because I feel like when you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, he's gonna have a big year, and then it falls flat.
Hold on. Can I?
Do you need references?
I do need a reference on the NHL one, because I remember having a whole conversation about that Logan Brown guy.
He was awesome in preseason, and I don't buy into that either.
You got all excited about it. Yeah, you did.
No. Here's why I'm going the prospect route, though.
Shut up.
Shut up.
You know, if I was going to take a backhanded slap there for my spring training,
only one of us is consistent on this note, and it's this guy right here.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
I tell T-Bone all the time, don't pay attention to spring. There are some things, skill-wise, that you can look at. Hey, Nolan Gorman looks faster. That is a skill that translates into the regular season. He should be a better defender because of that. I do not give a rip about any of the numbers that are taking place during the spring, and that is something that all of you should apply to your lives as well. But, Alex, what is your answer for the guy that you're most interested in spring training?
Saying Logan Brown had a great preseason. We'll move past that.
What about Marty Ferk?
Oh, Marty Ferk was great. They never gave him a shot, though. He's a fourth-line player. He was a fourth-line player. That was a coaching decision. Mine's Quinn Mathews.
Who was your guy this year that you told me, Kakanemi?
Kotkaniemi. Well, he's going to be an impact player.
Sure.
He's 19
definitely.
years old. He just came over from Finland.
Yeah,
Stop sidetracking me right now, okay? You're just presenting evidence that don't matter in this conversation.
Okay.
My answer to this is Quinn Mathews, because I don't feel like I'm going to take anything away from spring training with a lot of these major league guys. I think Lars Nootbaar, look, it's going to come down to health with him. I know what the skill set is. Jordan Walker, you can go out there and rip in spring training, but when I see it against major league pitching consistently, that's where I'll really get an answer. All of the other guys I kind of have answers for. Your pitching staff on the starting side coming out of spring training are all going to be guys who have pitched at the major league level. But mine's Quinn Mathews, because if Quinn Mathews goes out there and deals in spring training, already one of the top pitching prospects in the Cardinal system, climbing up the charts in Major League Baseball, this is a guy that, to me, a month, 2 months into the season, could be a part of your rotation and could help you pick up more wins. So Quinn Mathews is the one that I'm going to be really targeting this spring training.
I'm excited to see the adjustments that Gorman has made, because all offseason, the guys that we've heard the most talked about that have worked with Brant Brown and the guys that have been most excited have been the two guys that are really pillars for how this season goes, which is Gorman and Jordan Walker. And I'm intrigued to see what their new swings look like. I know that I will fall victim to their stats because I will get excited. I don't care what BK tells me. I ignore him. But I'm fascinated to see what those adjustments look like. Walker was super giddy at winter warm-up. I bought in on just that press conference of his, so I'm intrigued to see what adjustments he's made. And for Gorman, I'm curious to know, like, has he cut down on some swing and miss? He doesn't have to get rid of all of it. He is going to be a guy that strikes out more than others, but last year it was at an unreasonable rate. I'm curious to know if you see a little bit of that get chopped down in spring training.
All right, so I'm going similar to Alex, but it's with an expanded number of players. It's a whole group. The young pitching prospects, man. Whether that's Gordon Graceffo, Tink Hintz, Quinn Mathews, Cooper Jerpy, TK Roby, all of these guys are going to be a part of the big league camp at a minimum. Who knows how long they last, but early on they're going to be a part of it. If I had to put a specific player on this, it would be Gordon Graceffo, actually, for me. I feel like he is the post-hype sleeper guy because there was a point in time, I think it was 2 years ago now, where I remember talking to people around the team and they said, hey, watch out for Gordon Graceffo. This is back when they were still pretty decent. I guess it was 3 years ago now even. He was like in AA, single A, something like that at the time. This power throwing guy that added some velo, kind of similar to what Quinn Mathews did a year ago. And people were saying, hey, they might not trade for a reliever because Gordon Graceffo might be that guy. They might just call him up similarly to what they did with Jordan Hicks, for example, although not at the beginning of the year, mid-season, just throw him into the bullpen. We haven't really seen him over the last couple of years. And part of that is because the numbers have gone on decline. The velo has gone up and down over the last couple of seasons. He has not been as consistent. But we did see him briefly last season. I don't know about you guys. I kind of liked what we saw from Gordon Graceffo. And then he was just banished back down to AAA for the rest of the season.
And he just went Jose Fermin, MIA.
And then he would get starts and they'd go, well, once you get through the first time, you are done.
Yes.
No questions asked.
He might be a reliever. And that's okay because this team, guess what, needs some relievers in a meaningful way. Maybe Gordon Graceffo can be one of those guys. Maybe he ends up becoming one of the bridge guys. And I hate that they're doing this, but maybe Michael McGreevy starts out the year at AAA as a starter. Graceffo starts in the bullpen, and then you've got Steven Matz as your number 5 starter at the major league level. I wouldn't do it that way, but that is one way that you can make this work so you don't have like McGreevy starting in the bullpen as a long man, and then whenever you stretch him out, which is going to happen at some point this year, he's got to do it at the major league level of like, okay, we're starting out with 3 innings, and then 4 innings, and then 5 innings, the way that they did with Palante previously. So for me, it's the young starters, young pitchers. But if I had to put a name on it, I would go Gordon Graceffo as the guy that I'm most curious about going into the spring.
Can I just ask this question that I'm sure a lot of Cardinals fans are probably asking? Why do we need Steven Matz in the rotation as Cardinals? Because if McGreevy, Graceffo, I won't put Quinn Mathews into this because he still is young and he needs more innings in the minors, but let's say he goes out and is one of the best pitchers in spring training.
I'll take the other side on this. I don't believe it, but I'll take the other side because I do think there's at least an argument for it.
Oh, we're going to fight. Okay.
No, because I don't feel strongly enough to care at all about like, believing this.
Not where we're throwing hands.
The upside for Steven Matz is real. Like, I know people don't buy it because he gets hurt so often. Man, 2 years ago, he had a 3.80 ERA. 2 years prior to that, 3.80 ERA. It's why the Cardinals went out and signed him. And if you're looking at, hey, who has the highest upside for swing and miss stuff in the Cardinals rotation? Well, it's Sonny Gray. But second on that list would be Steven Matz. When he's right, which is rare, he looks pretty good as a starter. Now he's a 5 and dive guy, and that can be super annoying, but now he's in the slot that he should be in, which is as a number 5 starter. He provides a little bit of upside there. So the argument in favor of him being as a starter is that he has more upside than the other guys that you're potentially going to have there. And if he is the player that they think he can be, he does hold real value at the deadline. And you're going to extract more value out of him as a starter than you would if you had him as a reliever going into the season. So that is the argument in favor of it. You can knock that down in 100 different ways, and I understand it. I would do that personally, but if I'm playing devil's advocate, that's it.
If I was trying to start an argument with you, what I would say was 7 of those 18 starts, he had a really good ERA, and the other 11, he had a 6.2 ERA. But I'm not going to get into an argument over this.
But damn, those 7 starts were good.
They were great at the end of the season when you were already out of it. But here's the part for me. What was the goal of this offseason?
Transition.
Well, sure. Well, prior to that, what was the goal of this offseason?
Refresh.
Yeah, you're supposed to find out about young players. And if McGreevy, who pitched well last year when we saw him, Graceffo, who pitched well last year, like Andre Palante should be the poster boy to the Cardinals of like, hey, we actually might have something, but we refuse to use it because we've got all of these veteran pitchers. If one of these guys looks good in spring training, I just am going to get frustrated with the fact that we're seeing Steven Matz start every fifth day.
I'm with you. I lean your direction. I would just go into spring and be like, hey, unless something weird happens, Michael McGreevy is a part of our rotation. Andre Palante is a part of our rotation. And that means all 5 spots are spoken for. Because then you have Eric Fetty, Miles Michaelis. I know, it's super annoying, but he's going to be a part of your rotation. And Sonny Gray. Boom, there's your 5. And everybody else, you're competing for bullpen spots. Somebody's going to be our long man. Steven Matz, I think, could actually... To argue the other side, I know I just did the devil's advocate thing, but I'm with you. I agree more with your side. I think Steven Matz could actually be a super valuable, like 1 to 2 inning burst lefty reliever coming out of the pen. I think he could be really good in that role.
I think he could rejuvenate his career like Matt Moore did.
I think he might have more value at the deadline in that role than he does as a number 5 starter, because if you're one of these contending teams, I don't need Steven Matz as a starter in my rotation. He ain't going to start a game for me in the playoffs. Nobody that is a real contender will be trading for Matz as a starter for the postseason. You know what he could be, though? That dude could be a dynamite lefty reliever that's coming in the 5th or 6th inning, giving you like 3 to 5 outs, and then boom, go to the next guy in your bullpen. That has value. That a contender will trade for, but they probably need some proof of concept this season to see that it works. So I actually think it makes more sense for the Cardinals in every possible way to have him as a reliever, but I just try to give you the other side to argue devil's advocate.
And you're great at that, buddy. We appreciate that about you. Oh, shoot.
Going to be a team player.
The thing that I find interesting about it going into the spring, like the guys that I'm most interested in the regular season, I just don't care what they do in the spring.
Yep.
Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Mason Wynn, Lars Nootbaar. I can't really learn anything about these guys. If there's a position I'm curious about, it's center field. I just don't know how much spring training matters for center field in spring training.
Because I think they already have their minds made up on center field going into spring, and that's Michael Ciani because they need the defense.
It might be. So spring training is not what it typically is. There are not a whole lot of position battles for this team. We'll get into some of them as we go along here throughout the day, but for me, it's personally the pitchers, but more specifically Gordon Graceffo. Alex says Quinn Mathews. T-Bone, yours was?
Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, the guys that you don't care to see.
There we go. So
we won't ask you about it throughout spring training. We'll talk to you once the season begins in March.
I just have a tough time figuring out where the roster. I mean, we just mentioned it's hard to pick roster spot battles, so like it's hard for me to get excited about Quinn Mathews when I may not even see him.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. I don't think you'll see him on opening day, but maybe at some point this year we'll see him. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube as always at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. In 15 minutes, our friend and the Blues insider for The Athletic, Jeremy Rutherford, will join us. He wrote a piece recently with Blues head coach Jim Montgomery talking about where the Blues are at this point, how he feels like his first 10 weeks on the job have gone. JR also had a mailbag that was released earlier today, so we'll talk to him about both of those pieces coming up in 15 minutes. But next, do we really need to expand the college football playoff again? It sure sounds like it's coming, and the SEC and the Big Ten are driving this bus right off of a potential cliff. We'll tell you about it next here on 101 ESPN. All right, so we liked the college football playoff format for the most part this year, right? There's
some of
things
us
that can be tweaked, but we, for the most part, agree. It worked pretty well, right?
Yeah.
You agree with that, T-Bone?
Yeah. Yeah. There were some adjustments, but yeah, it was good.
We could redo the seeding. Maybe there's not like top 4 qualifying offers that go out to the teams that win their conference. You switch that up a little bit. Maybe there's reseeding that takes place in the second round, but more or less, we thought it was pretty well run. Well, they didn't like it. College football, specifically the SEC and the Big Ten, really want to change this thing already. Last year, there was a change. Now, this happened kind of with a cloak and dagger behind it. Apparently, the SEC and the Big Ten just like hold full control starting in 2026 over the CFP, which means it's time to exercise that right. And that's starting now.
Good.
So they have had some behind closed-door meetings, and they have decided, you know what works for us? We don't care about the Big 12. We don't care about the ACC. We don't care about the group of 5 teams. No. What works for the Big 10 and the SEC, the only 2 conferences that really matter around this time, 14 to 16 teams. That's what we're looking at. We would also really like 4 automatic qualifiers from both the Big 10 and the SEC.
Now, why would they
So
do
8
that?
total teams make it to the college football playoff. So half of the field minimum make the college football playoff field starting in 2026 and beyond from those 2 respective conferences. Now, a trickle-down effect that I think could actually be good for fans, just if you're a college football fan nationally, this would push the SEC, according to a story that was posted on Yahoo Sports, to play 9 conference games starting very soon. It wouldn't happen literally this upcoming year, but beyond that, starting 2026, that following season, the 27 playoff, there would be potentially 9 SEC conference games. Right now they play 8 with the 4 non-con games, and a lot of people, it's just like 3 blood donors and then a really nice one. That's what Alabama does every year, for example. Alex, when you hear that, 14 to 16 teams, 4 automatic qualifiers from both the Big 10 and the SEC, and then 9 conference games being the biggest change for the SEC. Is this something you're interested in? Do you feel like this is a good way for college football to go? How do you feel about this?
So my initial thought is, why do we need to do this? Because like it's so frustrating, especially when you find out that 2 of the leaders in the SEC and the Big Ten are the ones that are kind of constructing this closed door meeting. It's like, okay, so what's the ulterior motive here? It's to get more money for the SEC and the Big Ten, and it's not to create more excitement for the game. Part of me also wants to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I think a lot of people were frustrated that they were expanding the college football playoffs and went to 12 teams, and you were like, this isn't going to be as good. I know there were a lot of people that kind of fell into T-Bone's camp going into this year, and you were pleasantly surprised. Here's the part of it, though, that does rub me the wrong way. You're adding 2 more SEC teams, 2 more Big Ten teams. Basically, you're adding the juggernauts in the 2 conferences to where everything else is just kind of out of reach. So these other conferences that are getting in, as fun as it is to say like, oh man, you got a team, the Big 12 that's getting in, or you're getting one of these non-cons that are getting in, it all gets wiped away when you think about, yeah, there's 4 SEC teams, there's 4 Big Ten teams. You're going, the big boys into the house are playing in the college football playoffs.
And I should have mentioned this, it also includes 2 Big 12, 2 SEC, 1 group of 5, and then either 1 or 3 automatic qualifiers from the at-large. So you'd have 4 Big 10, 4 SEC, so there's your 8 spots, 2 Big 12, 2 SC, or 2 ACC. So that gets you up to 12. 1 group of 5, that's 13. So if you have the 14-team playoff, you have those that I just mentioned as automatic qualifiers from their respective conferences. And then if Notre Dame is in the top 14,
right,
Notre Dame gets that final spot. There is no other team that gets in. If they're not, then you get the one other qualifier that's an at-large team. If you end up going to the 16, you get 3 of those. So potentially Notre Dame plus 2 others. So that would be the new format.
And again, it just comes down to you're getting the 2 top teams that are getting the most teams in there, and they're guaranteed spots, which kind of tampers down the expectations once the playoffs begin.
Yeah, to me, it feels like too much. I like the SEC and Big Ten. The Big Ten probably fits more of this to where, like, if you gave them 4 automatic qualifiers this year, it would have made sense because they were pretty top-heavy conference. SEC was not a top-heavy conference. The SEC was in a down year, and the SEC just won't admit it. I hate the fact of guaranteeing 4 automatic qualifiers for those conferences, because you could end up with years like this year where the SEC, they had some good teams. Like Texas was a solid team. Georgia was a solid team until Carson Beck got hurt. Yeah. But then, like, you look at where the, 4th team would have been in the standings, and it's a jumbled tiebreaker, but it's like Alabama, it's Missouri, it's Ole Miss, it's South Carolina. And you look at those teams and you go, okay, they're good, but do they deserve an automatic spot in the playoff? And that's where I would say no. And that's why I wouldn't like this idea. I don't like the idea of guaranteeing 4 spots for the SEC because the conference does have down years. And when it does, that means we're going to potentially put in one SEC team ahead of maybe a third ACC school that's more deserving. I just don't like that idea of this, but I know this is the direction they're going to go because the SEC and Big Ten control the power, but I don't like it. To me, this is too much expansion for the playoff.
So somebody on the text line brings up a fair question. Can you guys run through what the bracket would have been this year if this was the way that things worked out? I can try to do that as quickly as possible. So in the Big Ten this year, if you had 4 teams, it would have been Ohio State, it would have been Oregon, it would have been Penn State,
Indiana, right?
And Indiana. The SEC this year, it would have been Texas and Georgia, Tennessee, and who would have been the 4th? Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. And then in the ACC, you would have had 2 teams that end up getting in under this format. So the ACC would have been, God, the ACC stunk this year.
SMU and Clemson.
Clemson and SMU.
Which they got in this
they got
format.
in no matter what. Still stunk.
The Big 12 in this scenario would have been Arizona State and BYU.
Ugh.
I was fine with Arizona State, but then BYU came in. Woof.
The Group of 5 team in this scenario would have ended up being Boise, that also got it in. You would have had Notre Dame in as well. So if you had the 14-team format, 8, 10, 12, 13, that's the 14. If you had the 16-team format, the next highest ranked teams that would have also been able to get in would have been, let's see here, starting with Iowa State,
Oh, God.
Illinois,
Oh, no.
and Alabama.
Yeah,
Yes.
see, and that's where
I
I'm out
believe
of that.
those would have been the next
You know what?
3
I changed my
teams.
mind. I like this
That's where
expanded
I'm out
playoff.
because if you're going, those 3 teams do not deserve to be in the college football
that's
playoffs.
after the college football playoff was already played. So it actually would have been Alabama, Miami, and Iowa State.
Yeah, no way. That's where you lose
Yep.
me.
Alabama, Miami, and Iowa State would have been the next 3.
All right, I'm out
would have
again.
been, Mizzou and Illinois would have been the next ones out.
I'm still.
All right, we need 20.
No, see, that's what. When's this going to end? We're going to get to 24 at some point.
Well, when everybody's in a 134-team bracket, baby.
I haven't given my opinion on this. I don't like it. I would prefer they not expand it. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think people are going to complain about this more than what's worth complaining about. I think this is the way that everything's going, man. For better or for worse, like the SEC and the Big Ten are like 16 teams right now, dude. They are the power conferences in every possible way. They hold all of the power with the college football playoff. It's annoying. We're going to complain about it. And I think if this is implemented, we'll probably react to it the same way that we did this year. Are there problems with the way that it goes about? Yes. Are there problems with the specific formatting of it? Sure. I think it will have fewer issues, though, than what we saw in year 1 of the current format with these 12 teams. I don't think it's the end of the world if we go to this, man. And I personally prefer the 16-team playoff to the 14. If you're going to do this, like, allow for the automatic or the at-large bids to get in as well, because then at least it opens up the possibility of more ACC or more Big 12 teams getting in. The reality is it's probably just going to end up including more of the Big 10 and the SEC because they're just the better conferences, if we're being honest here. But at least then it opens it up. And if you're the highest ranked team, if you're the ACC and you get 3 other teams that are ranked higher than the 5th through the 7th ranked SEC and Big 10 teams, so be it, dude, and let's go ahead and ride with it. But I don't think that's the end of the world. I think it could actually result in some pretty fun football. It gets rid of the conference championship games, most likely. It gives you 9 games of conference play in the SEC. All of this, to me, as a neutral observer, I'm obviously a Mizzou fan, but as a neutral observer, I just like watching good football throughout the college football season, and I think this allows us to get more of that good football to be played.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing like Mercer versus Bama in week 11, I get to see an extra SEC team play against Alabama. To me, that's good. I think that's a good thing for the conferences, but I know I might be in the minority in that regard. I'm certainly in a minority compared to what T-Bone is here.
Yeah, it just, if you're going to lead with, hey, I personally don't like this, then say it with your chest and don't back away from it.
Okay, let me say it a different way. I don't mind this.
Yeah.
I think people are going to bitch and moan about it the way that we did with everything else with the expansion of the college football playoff. Dude, mostly it's been good. Mostly, it's been a positive.
At
for
what
the
point
sport.
is too much, though?
I think
because like they're going to
16 has to be
continue
the
from
end.
here. Right? Well, they're going to keep
they're
going.
going to keep going, and that's
And
my
at
concern.
that point, that will be when I complain about it. I always thought 8 was the right number. I always thought getting to 8 was probably the ideal setting for them. You get the 5 conference champions and then 3 at-large bids. And that, to me, was always the place that I would have liked to have seen college football go. But now that you're here, I think 16 is fine. You're already at 12. 16 to me allows you to get the best format possible, given what you have as the necessities with the ACC and Big 12 getting 2 teams.
Again,
apiece.
I think the success that they just had this previous college football playoffs is why I'm willing to give them a chance. But I'm kind of in the camp of where T-Bone's at. Like, when's it going to stop? Because we've had 1 year expanded and we're already going to 16 potentially. Next year we could be at 20. 2 years we could be talking 24, and that's where it gets ridiculous.
Absolutely. Full agreement with that.
That's where I am. I don't think you need 16. I think your format's fine at 12. I think they actually did pretty well. The only issue we have is the way that they seeded it. Outside of that, like, it was a perfect format. You get at home, you get home games, and to your point on like the SEC, this gives us now Bama doesn't play Mercer. Well, the SEC should go to 9 conference games anyways. They don't need an expanded playoff to do that.
They're not going to do it without.
Well, that's ridiculous because the
There has
Big
to be
Ten
incentive.
plays 9 conference games now.
Sure. That
And
was their choice, though. The SEC chose not to do that because they viewed it as, hey, if we play these blood donor games, it gives us more wins. And at the end of the year, that's what they look at is, do our teams have the wins or not? So there's no incentive for the SEC right now to play that extra conference game. This provides that. And it also, let's be honest, the conference championship games are null and void right now. There's no reason for these conference championship games to be played. So if you're telling me I can trade the conference championships and what I get in return is this extra week of the college football playoff, I think that's a good deal for college football fans. I think if the trade is basically, hey, we used to have conference championship games, now we get an extra conference game in the SEC and this extra week of the college football playoff, I win as a viewer. And ultimately, that's what I care about. With T-Bone and Alex on BK, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to questions and answers. But next, Jeremy Rutherford is our Blues insider for The Athletic. He joins us here on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Team USA fell to Sweden last night in their final round-robin game of the Four Nations tournament, but they advanced to the championship game where they'll have a rematch with Team Canada, and you'll be able to hear that game here on 101 ESPN on Thursday, as well as pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Hope you guys are being safe out there. The roads weren't too bad on the main areas. 70 was fine for me coming in. 370 wasn't even all that bad, but man, the side streets suck. So be careful out there.
Yeah, especially you guys in Jefferson County, my neck of the woods. Good luck in these next 24 hours.
I'm sure everything will be fine.
Winter is coming.
Did you guys have school today out there?
No, everything was shut down.
Okay, good.
Yeah, everything was. I don't go to school, BK. But
I was asking for your kids.
No, well,
I apologize.
Yeah.
I should have been more clear.
It's fine.
Hey, Alex,
it's fine.
did your kids have school today?
They didn't, buddy.
You didn't have school today,
T-Bone,
bud?
did you have school today?
No, I didn't
That's
see
what we
school.
really should have been
Why?
asking that question to. Did T-Bone have school today?
All right, let's go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by our friend, Blues insider for The Athletic. He's on his winter break right now as well, as there's the Four Nations face-off. By the way, you'll be able to hear U.S. versus Canada in the final right here on 101 ESPN. That's coming up in a few days. JR, appreciate the time as always, my friend. How you doing today?
Good. You had to remind me that the kids are home. Thanks a lot.
You guys didn't have school today either, JR?
Did not out here in Jeffco, and about every 20 minutes my son will say, hey, can we go downstairs and shoot pucks? I'm like,
Sure.
buddy, I have to work. I have to be able to afford these hockey sticks.
No, you don't, JR.
Come
It's
on,
the break.
man.
Come on.
No work takes place when there's no hockey, JR.
That's right. That's how it works, right?
Yep.
As JR has posted like 5 stories over the last
As JR
week.
is sitting in his dark room with his laptop open.
All right, JR, let's get into this. So you had a piece that posted over on The Athletic a couple of days ago now with Blues head coach Jim Montgomery. Talks to him about, what the last 10 weeks has been like, how he views his team currently. What was your biggest takeaway from your conversation with Monty?
Yeah, first of all, can we talk about these interviews with Jim Montgomery? I know you guys have done some. Alex has done some. And, when you have him on the phone, he was back in Boston visiting with the family during the break. And you got the questions prepared. You want to find out what does he think about how the team's played so far. How can the special teams be better? Robert Thomas, Pavel Buchnevich, Jordan Kyrou. I have noticed, Alex, you can probably vouch for this too, that in the time Jim Montgomery's been here, his answers are short and to the point, and he tells you what he wants to tell you. And the second part of that is that he's here to galvanize this group. The talent might not be there. They're going to be pulling the weeds the next couple months and making some changes this offseason. And in the meantime, there's no need for him to come out and be critical. So I know some people looked at some of these answers from Jim Montgomery and didn't think they were too in-depth. I just think that he looks at the situation and he's trying to make the most of it right now, create good habits with these players, get this team as together as this roster can be. And the takeaway I came away with, Brandon, is that consistency in every area, start of the games, throughout the 60 minutes, with the special teams, the consistency of the execution is where he wants this team to get to. And I don't think it can get there until that talent is there.
JR, it seems like over these last few years, it's gone from, thinking that the coach was the issue to now people focused and honed in on the players not being the players that they believe can take the Blues to the next level. Do you get that same vibe from the fan base after these last couple of weeks where they've struggled?
Yeah, I think that was probably there, even going into the season a little bit, even though there was the hope that they could be a wild card team and a playoff team. And, I realize they're 8 points out. Vancouver has a game in hand. They could go on a run, but you're looking at a team that hasn't won 3 games all season. But in terms of the talent, I think you continue to look at this roster that it needs a lot of reshaping. And, first and foremost, as Doug Armstrong and Jim Montgomery have said, they need these top guys to be their top guys. And it's so cliche in hockey. We talk about that all the time. But if you're paying guys, $8 million, $9 million, and you're counting on them to be those players for you, if they're not, you have no chance. You have no chance because these guys, the support players, they're not going to go in and put up 30 goals and help you win, every night. They're not going to pull you back from a 3-1 deficit and help you win the game late. So I think that as we go on here, we just need to keep reminding ourselves that Doug Armstrong continues to try to evolve this roster and correct some of the mistakes they've made with some of the contracts. And if they can move a couple of these guys out this offseason and kind of bring in some new guys with the Snuggaroos, the Dvorsky's, I think you'll see this thing go the direction that they hope it will go. It's just going to take some time.
So, Jer, on that note, the other day I made a comparison between Jordan Kyrou and Jake Gensel. It's not perfect. They're not one-for-one players. No two players in the NHL are perfectly aligned. But when you look point production-wise at what Jake Gensel has been for the entirety of his career, but especially at this point in Kyrou's career, where Jake Gensel was at that point, it's extremely similar, JR. The reason why I bring up the comparison is because Gensel's a guy that makes $9 million for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He previously was on the Penguins, and we went through it yesterday. He was like the fourth best player maybe on the Penguins, and right now he's probably the fourth or so best player on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Is it fair for the Blues in your mind to ask Jordan Kyrou to be more than what Jake Gensel has been? Because that's what it would require for him to be similar to the top players on some of these other contenders.
Well, I think you laid it out great there. And I kind of had a similar question in my mailbag about that. You hear for years that Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas are stars, going to be star players. And then now you hear people say, well, the Blues don't have any stars. And, that's what I tried to explain in my article, kind of what you're saying with this Gensel comparison is, these guys are stars on their team because they're the best players. But where do they rank against some of the top players in the league? You talk about the 3 or 4 players on Tampa that Gensel compares against. Or when he was in Pittsburgh, how does he compare against Sidney and Gino and those guys? You need a cast of those types of players. And if you don't have that, you have to have one of those top 5 draft picks, one of those generational guys. I think that's what people are saying when they say the Blues don't have a star player. They have very good players in Thomas and Kyrou, but can they be star players? And that's what you're looking for. So, the comparison to Gensel, is it fair? Well, you know what? It might not be fair, but that's what the Blues have to get from these types of players. And in the meantime, if they don't, if you're not going to tank and you're not going to get one of those generational players, then it's going to be up to the Kyrous and Thomases to be those guys. So, yeah, it might not be fair, but when these are the best of your best, and that's what you're paying them, that's what you expect. At least that's what the fan base is going to expect.
So, JR, a little bit ago you referred to the Blues potentially doing some weed pulling over these next few months, changing some rosters. How much gardening do you think is going to be taking place by Doug Armstrong?
Well, you just have to believe, Alex, based on Doug Armstrong and his long, successful career here in St. Louis, that even though he's going to be here beyond next season as the president of hockey operations, Alexander Steen will take over as the general manager, that he wants to put Alex in the best spot. And, and when I say that, I realize that, Doug's going to be helping with the decision making. And even though it's Alex's team, Doug's going to be front and center with Alex, trying to rebuild this team over the next few years. But he's going to want to put Alex in a good spot when he hands this thing over. And right now they're not there. I mean, they thought this was a playoff team, and they're trending not to be a playoff team this year. So, I think we'll see in as much movement as we can from Doug Armstrong this offseason. It just all goes back to the same thing that we've been talking about for a number of years here with the contracts and can you move them? And the latest, we've talked about Krug and Falk the past couple of years, Leddy with their big contracts, Braden Shen, he's in the rumor mill right now. A couple 3 years left on his deal, $6.5 million. It's going to take some, a major move with one of those big guys with one of those contracts, I think, to kind of see any significant change. In the meantime, as Doug Armstrong said at his last speaking with the media, he said that he's going to observe. Who do they think can be part of this thing moving forward? I think when you talk about the support players, whether it be the third and fourth lines, the second pair, third pair defense, those things can change too. But I don't think this team is going to see the movement that you want to see unless some of that core can be changed out like Doug Armstrong alluded to.
JR, final question that I've got for you, and it's a little bit of a follow-up to what you just said. Jeremy Rutherford is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You could read his great work over at The Athletic. He just did a mailbag, had a conversation with Monty as well. All of that over at The Athletic, and you can find the links on Twitter at JP Rutherford. We're going to have Darren Drager on the show tomorrow. He's going to join us. He's one of the guys that's been talking about the potential of Braden Shen being traded. I think he said the word specifically, mammoth return would be what the Blues are asking for. In your opinion, not based on reporting, because I know around this time of the year things can get really tricky with this stuff as we get closer to the trade deadline, but in your opinion, does it make sense for the Blues to explore that as we get closer to the deadline?
I think it does, and I say that knowing that Braden Shen, the type of player he is, or can be for you. He's playing very well this year, BK, and he's a leader. I always believe that you need to have pros in that locker room when you're going through a retool like this, and he's one of the guys I think that you can lean on, and he's a pro. All that said, he's got 3 years left on the deal. That takes him to age 36. And if you can move him, if there are teams out there who are interested in taking on that contract, I just think the Blues are more geared for the future than what Shen and his contract for the next 3 years can provide. So if you can move him, and Darren Dreger did use the word mammoth, what do you think of when you think of mammoth? You're probably thinking a first-round draft pick. I explained in my mailbag today that you just don't know. Are they retaining salary? Are there other pieces to a type of mammoth move? You don't know what's coming back in a Braden Shen deal. But if anything you get in return can help you move forward and take a contract off the books of a guy who's going to be 36 at the end of the deal, I think you have to look at it. And I do think with the rising cap, this thing's going up big time the next few years, that especially these contending teams, these big market teams, are just sneeze at the $6.5 million for the next 3 years. It's not going to be a big deal to them. If they have to, they'll buy them out in a couple of years. So I think the potential is there for something to happen.
JR, appreciate the time as always, man. Really great work over on that mailbag. Same thing with the conversation that you had with Monty. We'll talk with you again next week, man. Stay safe out there.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
You got it. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario. Like I said, if you want to tell all your friends, Darren Dreger going to join the show tomorrow at 11:15. He's the one that had one of the initial reports on the Blues potentially listening on offers for Braden Shen, and he mentioned the word mammoth as the potential return that they could get if they decided to make that kind of a move. Alex, one of the things that he mentioned, the increase in cap space that teams are going to have over the next few years. They mentioned that a couple of weeks ago at one of the owners' meetings that they had for the NHL. I do wonder not just what that means for Braden Shen, because, yeah, that means his contract is a little more palatable for other teams. It's beyond that, though. For the Blues, if they are able to move Shen's contract off of the books, I wonder if that opens up the possibility of Army reshaping this in the way of, you know what? This pack mentality, it worked for us in 2019. We've got to go a different direction now. Hey, Mikko Rantanen, what do you want? What are you willing to take to play in St. Louis for the next 8 years? Hey, Mitch Marner, you're hitting free agency this offseason. What would it take to make this work here in St. Louis for you? I do wonder if he's able to get one of these contracts off of the books, if he then reshapes it and says, all right, we're repurposing this money. Yes, it's going to make us a little lighter with our depth, but we've got to get a superstar on that wing for Robert Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, it's after watching how these teams have had success in the unofficial first half of the season in the NHL, it's hard for me to look at a roster that the Blues have and say, yeah, they can win with pack mentality, because I don't think there's a team right now that's having success that has pack mentality. And the other reason why I do agree with JR of why it might benefit this team to look at moving Braden Shen is what JR mentioned in his mailbag about Robert Thomas. The Blues are wanting him to take a bigger leadership role. And I think if you move on from Braden Shen, it opens up the captaincy. Does Robert Thomas get the captaincy right away? I actually don't think so. I think they just leave without a captain.
Probably.
But I think you push Robert Thomas into that role to where it's like, dude, you're the voice now. Like you, Kyrou, you're the voices now. If you want this team to find the playoffs and start winning, this is on you. This is no longer on Braden Shen. This is no longer on Colton Parayko, who will still have a letter A on the team, but you will be the potential captain moving forward. And I do wonder if that's a little bit where the Blues are at, much similar to when they moved on from David Backes and said, look, Petro's ready to be the captain. Let's give it to him.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. If you missed any of our conversation with Jeremy Rutherford, be sure to check it out on the podcast page after the show today. 101ESPN.com or the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Want to pass this along. John Rothstein did a podcast with Todd Golden, Florida's head coach. They're 22-3. They're one of the best teams in the country, a legit top 5 team right now. He asked Todd Golden, their head coach, which SEC team other than the SEC teams currently ranked in the top 10, there are 5 of them, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, or Texas A&M, does he think is most likely to make a run to the Final Four in March Madness? Todd Golden, without hesitancy, said, quote, Mizzou. Said, I'm a big fan of Missouri right now. Obviously, they gave us a pretty good run in Gainesville. They're explosive. They're deep. They have a lot of different weapons. They play a lot of different ways. Coach Gates, I think it's really difficult to prepare for what he does. You can tell they're playing with a lot of confidence. I think Mizzou is a team that can really make a deep run this year, end quote. They've got some believers, man. I'm one of them, but I really think this team has a real chance to get to the Elite Eight. Somebody on the text line asked a question as a follow-up to this. Are you guys ready to let Mizzou break your heart this year? I am. Existence as a Mizzou fan is pure pain, but I'm all for it.
Oh, yeah. I was ready to. As soon as they beat Kansas, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Mostly because I just want a local team to root for in the tournament.
Whoa.
Yeah.
A little hurtful.
Your team, I'm sorry, T-Bone, but they just.
choke. Now I get it, but
they choke.
You know, back when they played Kansas,
this team
we were good.
Reminds me so much. It's different sports, but the feeling that I have watching them, how it felt of like, I just don't know, and then eventually being like, oh, damn, no, they're really good. 2013 Mizzou football, coming off of a disastrous first season in the SEC in 2012. They had tons of injuries. Ended up, I think, going 5-7 if I remember correctly that year. But a lot of their young guys got experience. And so that next season, they came back with a lot of depth that had played, and then their starters that had got hurt the previous year were able to come back. Guys take a step forward, and then the 2013 team is like, okay, this is real. They ended up going to the SEC championship game. We don't need to talk about what happened when they got to the SEC championship game, but they got there. They were a game away from playing for the national championship potentially. That season felt similar to what I'm feeling right now watching this Mizzou team. Really good, coming off of a disastrous year. So, yeah, I'm ready to be hurt. I am. There's no doubt about it. I am ready to be hurt again.
First round exit.
From the 314, Alex, can you see Jake Neighbors becoming the next Shin? I see a lot of similarities in their game.
I think he already plays like Braden Shin. Difference is he's a winger, not a centerman. He plays physical, net front presence. Shin had a little bit more skill off of the rush with his shot ability, especially when he was younger. But yeah, I think Jake Neighbors is already playing like Braden Shin. That would be the interesting one for me. As much as I think Robert Thomas would be the captain if Shin gets moved, close second would have to be a Jake Neighbors for how they view him.
I would agree with that. I think he's close second. The shot is the one thing that really separates him from Shen. And I don't know if Shen ever really, I mean, I don't remember him as much when he was younger, but Shen's never had the elite shot, but I felt like his was slightly above average, and Neighbors just isn't there yet. If he can improve the shot a little bit, then yeah, I think he would be like almost a copy of Shen, except for he plays the wing, not a centerman.
All right, from the 314, guys, piggybacking from your conversation yesterday, are you excited for the Court of Gold Olympic basketball documentary that's coming out today on Netflix? The trailer looks amazing to me. Have you seen anything about this, Alex? I've seen a couple of the clips come out. I know they had a pretty emotional sit-down interview that they did with Kevin Durant and how much it means to him to play in the Olympics. Yeah, I'm excited about this. It's one of those push and pull conversations because you can see how much playing in the Olympics matters to these guys. Like, they really, really put on in the Olympics. And it becomes that much more frustrating when you see something like the NBA's All-Star Weekend or just some of the regular season games. Like, man, why don't you guys seem to care? Like, this is your product, and there's so much discussion surrounding the product. And the problem is, like, they no longer make the main thing, which is the basketball, the main thing in the NBA anymore. And I'm not saying that as like an old man yells at clouds thing. I like the NBA. It is a product that I want to enjoy, and they've made it hard to enjoy. The regular season, whatever, it is what it is. The All-Star game is supposed to be this, like, you're propping up the best and the brightest, the best possible players that you have to offer to the world. And instead, it's a shell of itself. It's more of it's a promotion of like Kevin Hart and celebrity and this DJ that's suddenly playing for 12 minutes or the TNT pre and post game show. Like, they got as much shine during the All-Star weekend as the players did. And that's not the way that it's supposed to be. So To answer the question directly about the documentary, yes, I'm excited about it, but it's going to be a weird backdrop to what we just witnessed over the weekend.
Yeah. Anytime you get documentaries like this where you got guys that are being somewhat honest, I'm always interested in it. But you're right. I mean, it comes down to which anything you say is going to get less significant because of what I just witnessed in that All-Star game and the complaining that has come out since then.
Interesting, because I've seen the trailers for this, and the gold medal game itself was awesome. I mean, remember Steph hitting the big shot at the Olympics. Outside that, this Team USA, I don't know. I don't have much. I think it's because the expectations for them. Sure,
it was the last run, and that's what made it special to me. But we're never going to see those guys on the court together again.
Even for me, then, I don't this group was always expected to take care of business like they did, and I get what you're saying last run. I don't know. It didn't have the same the Redeem team or Team or the Dream Team
but
those.
It doesn't have to be. That's okay.
I think this didn't have the luster of it.
No, it didn't, and I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with anything you just said. I think that all of it is 100% accurate. But sometimes a story can just be what the story was, and this was the last time that we're going to see Kevin Durant and LeBron James and Steph Curry on the same court together. Those are the three greatest players of this generation. And so to be able to see that and to be able to understand, now they're looking at their own basketball mortality, I think that's a cool story to tell, and I'm really curious to see what they have to say in it. But I get it. I get it if you're not as appealed by it. All right, last thing here. Guys, if Mizzou beats Alabama tomorrow night, will that change what people think outside of Missouri about this team? I think so. This
Sounds
is the
like
type
people
of
outside of Missouri, though, are all on board with this.
People that are real basketball heads definitely are into it, but I think there are still some that are a little late to the party, and that's understandable. It was a team that wasn't expected to be much coming into this season. If you beat Alabama, that opens some eyes, especially when on your resume at that point you will have defeated Kansas in a home game. You end up going on the road, beating Florida, and now in SEC play you also beat Alabama. That's 3 top 10 to 15 teams in the country. It's a pretty damn good resume.
Yeah. And then after that win, I mean, the rest is just non-ranked SEC opponents. And I think
one against Kentucky, but other than that, yeah.
Half of them are at home still? So got a pretty decent opportunity to run the table the rest of the way.
Yeah, when Rothstein has his next podcast and he asks a question of who's a sleeper in the SEC, Missouri won't be in that category because they will be moved up into the first conversation. Yeah, the top 5 if they beat Alabama.
I think if they win this game, they'll probably be right around back half of the top 10. They'll be similar to where Wisconsin's at right now, and they'll be deserving of that.
We get Wisconsin tonight,
dude. They're good.
We're kicking their ass. That's what's going to happen.
You don't believe that.
Yeah,
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Earlier today, there was a piece over on MLB.com putting together a compilation of the top players on every team as they're projected by some of these projection systems. I wanted to see how the Cardinals' best player ranks compared to every other team in all of Major League Baseball, their best respective players. We'll tell you where they rank on that list next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So MLB.com put together a piece today, and it was just ranking players, basically. So they go over to the wins above replacement projections for the 2025 season. And I know some people hate this. That's totally fine, but it's just a way to kind of measure performance, right? It's one way to do it, and I think it gives you an idea on how the projections are viewing each team's best player. So, for example, for the Blue Jays, their best player is expected to be none other than Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Oh, well, this is uncomfortable.
He's projected for about 5 wins this season. The Baltimore Orioles, Gunnar Henderson is projected to be their best player. That makes sense to me. 7 wins this year. And you can continue going along from there. For the St. Louis Cardinals, based on the projection system, they have a tie for the best player this year at 3.5 wins. It's Sonny Gray and Mason Wynn. Here's what the write-up says about those two players. The Cardinals' presumptive opening day starting pitcher and their talented young starting shortstop are tied for the team's projected wins leader entering the 2025 season. Wynn produced 3.5 wins as a rookie in 2024, holding his own with the bat while providing superb defense and solid base running. Sonny Gray signed a big contract last year with the Cardinals and ended up being one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball last year with more than 200 strikeouts and 166 innings. So they like Sonny Gray. They like Mason Wynn. 3.5 wins is where they're at. Alex, as I started looking up and down this list, I thought to myself, man, most of these teams have somebody that's at least worth 4 wins.
Oh, yeah?
At least. Like, for example, the division. The Brewers have William Contreras at 5.
Oh, we got his brother.
The Cubs have Kyle Tucker at 5. Oh. The Pirates have Paul Skeens at 5. And the Reds have Ellie De La Cruz at
5.
5.
Okay, good. This is great for the NL Central
so
this
I
year.
thought to myself, okay, this is a conversation we've had a lot about the Blues. Sure seems like it might apply to the Cardinals as well. How does your best player, or in this case, players, plural, compared to the best player from each other respective team across Major League Baseball? Alex, there were exactly 5 that had a lower threshold for their best player than the Cardinals.
Can I guess some of them?
Sure, go
White
ahead.
Sox?
Yep, they're 1. Luis Robert is their best projected player at 3 wins.
The Rays?
The Rays are indeed one of them. Junior Caminero at 3.
Rockies?
Rockies are another. Ezekiel Tovar at 3.
I couldn't name the Rockies either. And the Athletics?
Nope.
Oh, God.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Who's another bad team, T-Bone?
The Athletics are not on this list because Brent Rooker is projected to be better than anybody that you have.
Miami.
Miami is indeed on this list.
Okay, cool.
Sandy Alcantara at 3.3.
Let's chant it together. Top 5 pick. Top 5 pick.
You don't have one.
Top 5 pick.
There's one more that you're missing.
There's one more?
Yeah.
Who else is bad?
There were 5 total. The Rays, White Sox, Marlins, and Rockies are who you have so far.
The Angels. No, the Angels have somebody. It's Trout.
Yeah.
Who am I missing?
Indeed. The Angels have as their top projected player Mike Trout at 4.1.
It's 4.1, man.
I'll give it to you if you don't guess it on your next one.
It's
It's another team that's going through a rebuild right now.
And I think they have the ceiling with some of their players to beat you
the
on
Nationals?
this list.
Yeah. Nationals, James Wood, very young player. He's an interesting player, but I don't really get it with him, but whatever. 3 wins is what he's projected for. So those are the 5 teams. Rays, White Sox, Marlins, Nationals, and Rockies. Here's my question to you, Alex, pertaining to this. That's where they're projected to be. That doesn't mean that's where they're going to end. Like, it's entirely possible the Cardinals have a player on their roster right now that ends up with 4.5 wins this year. Like, that was Mason Wynn on some of these metrics last year. If it's not Mason, if it's not Sonny, or even if it is those guys, what is the likelihood of them having a best player that compares with some of these other best players across the league? What does that mean for the Cardinals?
If it's not Sonny and it's not Mason Wynn, it means you're going to be in this refresh transition for a little longer because you don't have a star. Because if those are the guys that you're labeling the star, Sonny Gray, incredible pitcher, but I'd argue that his best years might be behind him. Sure. Mason Wynn, you're excited about, there's no question, but that's not the type of star that this team is missing. They've got the defense, which is a great piece to have, and he's an awesome bat, but it's not that star Kyle Tucker-esque power. You're missing it. And if you don't have it in your system, you're going to have to go out and find a way to acquire it. And I don't know, I don't trust this team to be able to go out there and acquire it. And then if you don't, then you're in this endless cycle of still trying to draft and develop it, which you're going to be there for a very long time.
Yeah, I think the likelihood that you end up with somebody that can get to this spot that you're talking about, because I think everything that Alex just said is kind of spot on if you don't have somebody become this guy. I mean, to me, you got two other guys that can do this on the roster that can potentially get into this, whatever you want, 4 or 5 win kind of player. Contreras would be one of them. Now, the defense will be the thing that could potentially hold back his WAR numbers. But, I don't necessarily view Vlad Guerrero Jr. as a great defender.
No, he's just an otherworldly bat.
Yeah, and we talked about it. Contreras, if he's healthy and is at first base, if you just project out what he did last season, he's probably a guy that received some MVP votes. Now, he's probably not top 5, but he could have been top 10. So he's a guy that could do that. And then I know nobody's going to like this answer, but the other guy that's kind of a complete tool player that could potentially do this is Nootbaar. Nootbaar plays solid defense. If he goes to center, this could change. But if he's in a corner, he plays better defense in the corner outfield spot. He's above average at that position. He's going to walk, get on base, and he's going to hit for some power. He's the kind of guy that could creep up, maybe not to 5 wins, but a 4-win player that could get you there. And then all of a sudden you're looking at this roster and potentially going, hey, we've got 4 guys with a 3.5 to 4 WAR. Yeah, that's a pretty good roster then in that case. So they've got some guys that can get there, but I mean, we're all on the same page. Call me a little skeptical of that.
Totally. And real quick, Alex, on this, John from the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN says BK really goes for these made up numbers. Fair enough. If you hate the numbers, you hate the numbers. But just set aside the wins above replacement side of this. The Cardinals' best player stacking up to other teams' best players. Think about it that way, right? Forget any of the numbers that are associated for a second. I think we can all see, hey, if your best player is Mason Wynn or Sonny Gray, it just doesn't stack up against the other contenders right now. Maybe Mason Wynn has a great year. He was talking the other day about how he wants to focus on base running, so stealing more bases and hitting for a little bit more pop this year. He wants to be more explosive in both of those areas. If he does that, finishes with 25 homers and 30 stolen bases, I'm going to be singing a different tune by the end of the season. I love Mason Wynn, so it's possible. But as of today, let's go back to the numbers here for a second. You just look back since 2019. Here are the Cardinals' wins above replacement leaders that are above 4 for any individual season. Nolan Arenado, 7 for 1 year. Paul Goldschmidt, 7 for 1 year. Guess when those both happened? 2022. MVP caliber seasons. Tommy Edman, back in 2022 as well, had 5. Most of that was driven by his defense, but still a super valuable player for the Cardinals that year. Tyler O'Neill in 2021, up there in that MVP conversation. Paul Goldschmidt, 2021, up there in those conversations. Same thing for Nolan Arenado in 2021. 2019, Tommy Edman at 3.5. And then 2024, Mason Wynn, 3.5. That's the entire list for the Cardinals, position players, since the 2019 season that are at or above the level that we're talking about right now that is projected for Mason Wynn. So Mason Wynn is already projected to be top 8 player based on wins above replacement that the Cardinals have had over the last 6 seasons. That's a really good year, a really big projection for him. But it does not compare to other legitimate contenders across the National League. You need somebody to take that sizable step and to hit their way into the conversation with William Contreras, to hit their way into the conversation with Kyle Tucker or with, Ketel Marte. Those are the guys that need to be the peers for your best player by the end of the 2026 season. Forget just this year, because this is setting up for future seasons. By the 2026 season, we got to have somebody that we're talking about in that regard.
And to that point, sorry to cut you off, Alex. To that point.
Not one, but twice now.
3 times the charm. That happens, I'm slashing one of your tires.
That's fine. My question, though, is everything you said, right? It sets up for 2026 and beyond. So then doesn't this bat that we're talking about that hits this stride have to be somebody that's not Contreras? And the reason I say that is because he's under contract for, 2 more years after this year? I mean, the reason I ask that is we're talking 2026 and beyond. In theory, you'd want that to be somebody that is a cost control, in-house, develop a guy that you have longer than just a 2-year window.
Ideally, but I don't think it
to
has
get to that
to
spot.
Be. I think even if it's Contreras, at least you've got the guy internally for 2026. And then if he ends up leaving after 2027, so be it. Now the money is on my books as well that I can go out and acquire the next one. Now, I don't know how much faith we have that the Cardinals will go out and do that. That's another conversation that we can have. Hey, some of the dudes that you could go out and get, they're on this list. Kyle Tucker is going to be a free agent after this season based on every report that's coming out of Chicago. They ain't going to sign him to the contracts that he needs. Well, he's a really great player. He fits into the criteria that we're talking about. If the Cardinals don't get answers on these young guys that they're looking for, hey, go sign Kyle Tucker. They're not going to do it, but they could. Vlad Guerrero Jr. It was announced yesterday. He said publicly, we didn't come to a contract agreement with the Toronto Blue Jays. I'll talk to them after the season. I'm going to hit free agency. I'm going to test the market. Cool. Go get Vlad Guerrero Jr. Again, they're not going to do that. These are guys that New York and LA are going to be bidding on, but they're at least available. This upcoming class has the type of free agent that the Cardinals should be interested in if they don't have this player develop internally. And they are guys, to your point, T-Bone, that could be here for the next 8 years. Alex?
I got time now, right?
We need to go to break.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead. You've got 30
figured.
seconds.
T-Bone made the point that I was going to make. I don't think it can be Wilson Contreras. I think it has to be somebody like a Walker or a Gorman or a Wynn, somebody who is a part of the future for this team. Otherwise, you're going to be having the same questions moving forward. Doesn't really hit anymore, so you should have just went to break.
Coming up next, 314-399-96.
Change the damn name to BK and Company.
For better to forget it here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service X line for Bet It or Forget It. Guys, bet it or forget it. You're going to love this one. The Cardinals will have multiple 30 home run hitters this year.
Okay.
Forget it.
Somebody's drinking that Kool-Aid a little early. Forget it. I think I got one.
Well, damn, now I thought about it. I might bet it.
No, because you're going to go down the path of Nolan Gorman's going to hit 40 again. And how'd that work out the last time?
30. Can you get 30?
No, he couldn't even get 25.
What did he finish
wasn't
with
here
last year?
Yeah, which is problematic. I'm gonna say forget it. It's Wilson Contreras.
I'm going to change my answer and say bet it.
There you
It's going to be Contreras and it's going to be Gorman.
Oh yeah, because that T-Bone 3 worked out so well last year.
That was Nolan's fault.
Could be again.
You're gonna bet on him again.
Yeah, if
Smart.
Gorman, if he has a bounce back year, he can get to 30 home runs. I mean, hell, last year, you mentioned he wasn't here and he almost got to 20. So I'll bet it. I think he has a bounce back year. You're still going to get those big ups and downs with Nolan Gorman, but he'll get to 30, and then Contreras, if he stays healthy, can as well.
How many teams do you think had multiple 30 home run hitters last year?
Well, that's a trick question.
Could go either way, though, right?
26.
Oh, no way.
30 home run hitters.
A lot of them. There were a lot of them last year.
I'll go 5.
Yeah, it's a BK question, so I was going to say 7.
It's 7. Good call.
Okay.
Arizona, New York, LA, the Dodgers, Cleveland, the Mets.
I'm glad you clarified. I was thinking it was the Angels.
You never know. Baltimore and
Rendon
Philly.
and Trout.
Those were the 7 teams. Guess what all of those teams, I believe, had in common last year?
Playoffs? Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not just a pretty face. There's a reason I say slug, baby, slug.
Yeah, but you keep picking the wrong guy to slug, baby,
Well,
slug.
No, he's got it in there.
I'm going to say bet it. What the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Your
YOLO.
second baseman and your first baseman, or DH and first base, or maybe third base and maybe DH and third. I don't know. Whatever positions they're going to be playing
BK
this year
thinks there's
between
5.
Gorman and Contreras. I think those are the 2 guys that hit at least 30 this year. I mean, both are capable of doing so if they stay healthy. Alex?
Guys, bet it or forget it. We see a rogue injury for a USA defenseman between now and Thursday so Quinn Hughes can play in the game.
I'm going to say forget it. I think people are making a little too much of this. If they thought that Quinn Hughes was such a great player, why wasn't he on the original roster?
He was hurt.
Yeah, but they could have made that change at some point over the last 4 months.
No, he was on the roster and he was hurt going into the tournament, so he wasn't on it.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
You don't think Quinn Hughes was picked to be a part of the roster?
I was confused. I was like, Quinn Hughes is pretty good. Why wasn't he a part of the original roster?
Good.
No, that's a bad job by me. I'll say forget it still, because they're not going to put him out there unless he's 100%. And he's probably not 100%. So
I'll bet it.
The amount of people that are tweeting right now, it's like, oh, it's pretty windy in Boston and those roads are pretty slick. An American defenseman could just trip and tweak something.
Oh, yeah, that would be terrible. I would bet this. I think you're going to see a rogue
I do too.
injury.
wow.
Greg Wyshynski tweeted out saying Jake Sanderson should probably have somebody paid to test his food for the next 48 hours. There's been some good ones on Twitter. I'm betting this one. Quinn Hughes will be playing on Thursday in that Team USA
poor
rematch.
Jake Sanderson.
Yeah, poor Jake.
He thought he was going to be able to be a part of history.
You know Doug Armstrong's got to be livid right now. This team working the loopholes
Zach
to get Quinn
Werenski.
Hughes.
He's been awesome.
He's going to probably win the Norris Trophy this year.
Zach Werenski.
No, he's really
been
good,
Over
man.
Quinn Hughes.
He's really good, man.
Yeah, sure. Zach Werenski.
Travis
been awesome.
Sanheim, that's the one you called out. I think
Yeah,
he's
for
Team
sure.
Canada. I think he's the one that you could be like, really? This one?
Zach Werenski?
Dude, he's like the second most goals right now among defensemen in the NHL. It's him and Cale
Crazy.
Makar.
That's crazy.
Guys, bet it or
Makar's back this week. It's weird that he wasn't on the original roster either. He's come back.
Wait, what?
I don't know. Who'd you say?
Cale Makar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's odd he didn't play the other night,
Crazy.
you know?
They're going to have to need an injury, too.
They probably were doing a healthy scratch because he didn't play up to the capabilities.
Where did this come from for Cale Werenski?
No, it's Zach Werenski.
I was going to say, who's Kale?
Yeah, Zach Werenski, like I said.
T-Bone, you need to get to this.
Big Z, he can't take that nickname. That's
Yeah, no, you can't take
Zadrunas
is it-
Ilgauskas.
What?
No, it's Zdeno Chara.
No, Big Z is Zadrunas Ilgauskas.
All right, bet it or forget
No,
it.
Big
You
Z
remember him,
is
right?
yeah, but Big Z is Zdeno Chara.
Who'd Zadrunas Ilgauskas
Cleveland.
play for? Yeah, that's my boy.
Are you kidding me? I
Is
love
that the
that
bald
dude.
guy that was with
Is that
LeBron?
the bald guy?
Yeah, I know who he's talking about. Yeah, I got this.
Zach Werenski?
I should.
He's been incredible this year.
Yeah, this year. It came out of nowhere.
I mean, I wouldn't pay him beyond this year because of that.
He's already paid.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he's like 30.
He had
Been in the
57
league for a
points in
decade.
70 games last year.
He just bought a number, dude. Especially with defensemen. They age like wine.
That guy's good, apparently.
Yeah.
Who watches Columbus? But that guy's good. Somebody should trade for him.
You should watch
Get him
Team
on a good
USA.
team.
He looks awesome.
He's also got 5 assists in 3 of the 4 Nations tournament games, but that's fine.
He's good. I don't know where it came from, but that guy's good.
I just can't believe they didn't put Quinn Hughes on the roster.
Plays 27 minutes a night. That guy's awesome. T-Bone?
Guys, bet it or forget it. We will see 2 St. Louis Cardinal starters. With
By the way, Jackson Burkett saying that I'm right. Big Z is Ilgauskas.
Jackson, you're the basketball guy. Zdeno Chara is Big Z.
Guys, bet it or forget it. We will see a St. Louis Cardinal starter with a sub 3.5 ERA.
Bet it. Sonny
Sub
Gray.
5 or sub 3.5?
Sub 3.5. You don't got a ton of old guys to worry about that sub 5.
Yeah, I'll
mark.
bet it. It's going to be Sonny Gray. Because he's just going to he'll pull himself out of the game by like 5 because it gets too hot, and that's how you keep those numbers down.
I mean, I can't blame him.
I can't either. It's really hot.
I think I would bet it too.
Do they have 2?
No, I don't know who the second would be because I don't think Palante can be sub 3.5. McGreevy's got to play the BABIP game if he's in the rotation. Matt stinks.
Eric
Michael
Fetty?
Stinks. Fetty's going to fall back to earth. I would say bet it, though. I think Gray can do it.
Zach Werenski makes $9.5 million a year.
No, it's Cale Werenski.
I know. $9.5 million a year. Is there a more anonymous great defenseman than Zach Werenski?
Because he plays in Columbus.
No, I get that. But
Wait, I've been there. There's nothing there.
If you put Zach Werenski in Edmonton, he would be Cale Makar.
that feels aggressive.
Well, okay, in terms of how people are talking about him this year, he would be a Cale Makar.
Somebody else said Big Z is Carlos Zambrano. Man, there's a lot of Big Z's out there.
No, Carlos Zambrano
Do
was
we
only
have
good
big
for like...
anything else? Is it just Big Z's?
Well, we got Big D here in St. Louis, still in Holloway.
But it's just Z, right?
Yeah.
I wonder why. Wonder why we don't make like Big C's out there anyway.
What?
I can tell you why we don't use Big C a lot.
All of the letters that I could have chosen for the alphabet.
Now we all know where BK's head is at. Bet it or forget it, BK's not on the show tomorrow.
Bet it.
Oh boy! All right, 314-399-9646. Customer service text line.
Could you imagine yelling that to your buddy in the "Hey, Big C"? People would look at you and be like, "What?"
You called the man Big D. You literally named
I did.
him. You
No, I said it to him also. He didn't like it very much. It's like, what? I'm like, okay, I'll stop doing nicknames, man.
Oh,
I think Cale Makar's called Big C.
probably Little C.
He is only 5'11".
Yeah. All right. From the 314. Guys, better to forget it. One of Shin, Booch, Falk, or Letty are traded at this year's deadline.
Bet it.
Shin, Booch, Falk, Letty.
Bet it. I think 2 of them are gone.
Whoa.
Are you serious?
You heard JR say, like, there's going to be some pulling of the weeds. It's going to take a big hoe to pull all of those weeds this offseason. So you're going to have to get it started at the deadline, and I do believe that you'll see multiple of them gone.
I'm going to forget it. I don't think they move one of those guys. I just think it's going to be too hard to move term until you get to the offseason. The deadline, this is not when you typically see these kind of moves, so forget it.
I am going to forget this as well. If they're going to move these guys, I do think it's more likely in the offseason. But if they end up moving one, I could see it. 2 just feels like a lot.
I think you could get 1 forward and 1 defenseman of
I
that
think it'd
list.
be great for them for the long term. I think it'd be a good thing for this team, but it's hard to do at the deadline. All right, better to forget it. Bolduc will be part of a trade for the Blues to upgrade in their forward group.
I'm going to forget it for now because I don't see what's available forward-wise that's an upgrade to where you would trade Zach Bolduc. I think they like Zach Bolduc. The style of hockey he plays, there's some optimism there. I would say there's other forwards that could get traded in a deal before Zach Bolduc, so I'll forget it.
I'll say bet it.
I think I'm leaning bet it as well. He feels like the odd man out of the group, right? Like when we talk about the Blues moving forward, we never mention Bolduc. We mentioned Neighbors. We mentioned Snuggerud, Dvorsky, Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich. Not once have we really ever said Bolduc. He just feels like he could end up becoming the odd man out, so I will bet this as well.
All right, last thing here from the 636. Guys, better to forget it. Jordan Walker is the most important Cardinals player this year. We're going to have our 20 most important Cardinals list throughout
This is
spring
gonna
training.
suck.
I think we're going to have to change the way that we look at that list, though.
Well, dude, you've been talking about their offense improving.
Yeah,
I know.
Sub
told me
3.5
there's
starter.
230 home run hitters.
Normally, we would do it where it's like, hey, most important player for the Cardinals to reach the playoffs this year. If this guy hits his ceiling, that means that they reach the postseason and they become the best version of themselves. I think I can't speak for you guys. For me, when I'm doing my most important players list this year, I'm going to be thinking about the most important Cardinals for the organization to have success. That's in 2025 and beyond.
That's where I'm at as well.
And
because
if we're talking about that, I think Jordan Walker would still probably be at number one to me. So I'll bet this.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be up there because that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at this season as a lost cause. There's not a shot at the playoffs, which means if I'm doing the most important Cardinals players, it's got to be for, are you projecting to be somebody for this team moving forward? And I think right now I have like 3 guys in the top of my mind that will be at that first place spot with Jordan Walker, the slight edge.
Yeah, I think Walker. I would bet this. I think it is Walker, and I think like the next close second actually might be a guy you don't see till like July, and that might be Quinn Mathews.
That's who I was thinking as well.
I think it's fair. It's going to be. It's going to be one of the more. I bet you our list has more differences in it this year than it has at any point over the last like 3 or 4 years that we've been doing
What was
this.
here you left off Yanni?
That was 2 years
You're not
ago.
being right.
Yeah, I was correct on that
you
one.
were.
Yanni was gone half the season.
Yeah, you decided, hey, I just want to go down, hang out with my basketball team in Puerto Rico. I'll see you guys in August. And it worked out for everybody involved. All right, with Alex and T-Bone on BK, coming up next, can Robert Thomas bounce back this year the way that Colton Parayko did for the Blue Line? We'll talk about that coming up here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here. They Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, USA fell to Sweden in their final round-robin game of the Four Nations tournament, but they advance to the championship where they'll take on Team Canada. We'll have the game for you here on Thursday, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock here on 101 ESPN, then puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CDMilanoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, so Robert Thomas is a good player. We would all agree with that. But I think it's fair to say, Alex, it's been a relatively disappointing season compared to expectations. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So earlier today, in Jeremy Rutherford's mailbag that he put out there, he was asked a couple of different times about Robert Thomas, his season, his leadership, where things stand on Robert Thomas compared to, where we were coming into the season. And I thought one of his answers on it was really interesting. He said that for Thomas, quote, he's a player they've spoken to about having better body language. This doesn't mean that he's not respected. He is, but I think the club wants more from him. He also said at some point that he thinks that the ankle remains an issue. Quote, I don't know how much it's hindering, but I don't think he's, quote, 100%, end quote. I think that's interesting. JR doesn't just randomly put that into his piece. He's got that based on reporting that he has done around the team, and that is certainly noteworthy. But when you think about Robert Thomas in this season, this is not the first player that we've talked about like this. Hey, comes out, has a great season, and then you expect them to take that next step. And as we know, progress isn't linear, and so they take a little bit of a step back before then taking another leap forward. The last guy to do this was Colton Parayko, who had that rise to prominence here in St. Louis, so much so that Doug Armstrong said, we've got a number one defenseman. We don't need to bring back Alex Pietrangelo on a risky deal with a no-move clause because we've got Colton Parayko already ready to take that step as a number one right-handed defenseman. And then the back issues happened. He wasn't the same guy for a little while. And then this year, wow, looks like a real, whether it's a number one defenseman or at a minimum, top pair defenseman, he's playing that part. What needs to happen for Thomas to have that? The Colton Parayko bounce back, whether it's from injury or just a lack of performance, whatever you believe it to be this year, what needs to happen for Thomas to get back on that track the way that Parayko did?
Well, first off, to me, it would be health, because what you saw in December is what I believe Robert Thomas is, and he was one of the three best players in terms of points and plus-minus rating amongst forwards in the month of December. So that goes to show you that the skill was there. I think if this reporting is true, which, I believe when JR puts it out there, you probably that injury's caught up to him a little bit, and that's where you saw the decline in the month of January. So health is going to be the first thing with it. But I think for Robert Thomas, it's going to be a little self-commitment in terms of realizing that, hey, I'm going to have to improve how I perform. Just what Colton Parayko did from that the 2022-2023 season going into the next year, performed a little bit better on defense. I think that's when you really started to see him embrace a little bit more of the physicality than what he had done before. But it's also going to be putting players around him. Parayko didn't have any significant changes last year when I felt like his game took to the next level. It was still Nick Leddy playing with him. It was still Justin Falk and Torrey Krug. The defense didn't change. But this year, you've seen more pieces on the defensive side, and look at where his game has gone. He's 12 goals. He's been one of the better defenders in the NHL this season. I look at Robert Thomas the same way. As much as I can criticize this season and how it has been a step back, I think they need to put some weapons around him, because what Robert Thomas did last year was probably the ceiling with this team. He got 26 goals, was a point-per-game player, one of the best defensive players in the NHL, and he did that with Pavel Buchnevich, who was probably at his peak, Jordan Kyrou at his peak, Jake Neighbors at his peak. But if they're asking for more from him in terms of leadership off the ice and then, of course, play on the ice, it's going to come down to you got to give him some weapons to work with, because Robert Thomas can't be that guy if he's playing in the entire game in the defensive zone every single night. He can't be that guy if he's getting less than 30% faceoffs in the offensive zone and you don't have a shooter who he's passing the puck to. Not saying that these are the same players, so please do not jump on this and think that I'm doing it. But at 24 years old, Nathan MacKinnon was asked the same thing. Colorado went to him and said, dude, we need more from you. And that year he had 16 goals, was a -14, and had 53 points in 82 games. And you know what he did the following season? 39 goals, 97 points, and a +11. But you know what he also got that season? He got a healthy Mikko Rantanen that scored 29 goals and played 81 games with them.
That'll help.
That'll help. Yeah. So I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's Snuggerud. I don't know if it's an outside addition. But for Robert Thomas, because I think he's probably the best option for this team to have that star quality player, you're going to have to give him some type of weapon to work with in that top line.
All right. So I've got a list of names. It's 16 names long, so bear with me. But I think it's worth getting into here for what you just said there, Alex. Players under the age of 30 that are forwards since the start of last year, 125-plus points and at least a +10 on the ice. So young players like Robert Thomas that had at least as many points as Thomas has with at least as good of a plus-minus as Thomas has, right? So that's the list that I'm about to give you. Here is the entirety of that list. Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, David Pastrnak, Mikko Rantanen, Sam Reinhart, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, Kirill Kaprizov, Matthew Tkachuk, Sebastian Aho, Brandon Hagel, Jack Eichel, Alexander Barkov, and Jason Robertson, end of list. Those are all stars. Like outside of St. Louis, we would look at everybody that I just mentioned outside of, would you argue Hagel? Would you consider him to be in that star category?
No, I would put him kind of in the Jake Gensel conversation.
Sure. So maybe that's the one that I would push back on. Was there anybody else that I mentioned that you'd be like, not sure that they necessarily qualify?
No, I don't think so.
I think I'm with you. Hagel and Thomas are probably in the same category on this as well, where it's like, hey, they're posting the numbers that we're talking about with these other players, but maybe not quite reaching that same ceiling. Thomas in a lot of these different categories is like, man, you're right on the cusp. You're right on the cusp. You're right on the cusp. He needs that elite winger with him. Mm-hmm. And he needs to perform better as well. I'm not going to give him a complete pass for what we've seen over the last couple of months. But if it's injury-related, cool. That at least helps to explain it. Kind of similar to Shin. Yep. Shin last year was not healthy the entirety of the season. Looks like a different dude this year.
Similar to Colton Parayko, who was not it.
So sometimes when you see these players and you look at it, you're like, man, they don't look like themselves. Buchnevich, I'm wondering this about as well.
That's the one.
Could it be related to something that is affecting them physically that's just not allowing them to perform at their peak? I think Thomas is a really good player. Is he a star? I don't know. Maybe not quite. I think he might be, though. And if he's not, he's just not a superstar. Mm-hmm. The best way to get him there is by going out and getting another player from this list. Think about the number of players that I just mentioned that have another star with them. Nathan MacKinnon has Cale Makar. He had Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen, I could say the same thing about him. Like Matthew Tkachuk is playing with Alexander Barkov on this list. Like, most of these dudes, the two players from Toronto that are on this list as well, most of these guys have somebody else on their team that fits that criteria, and the Blues just don't right now. The closest thing they've got is Thomas and Kyrou, and they barely even play together.
Well, and somebody just texted that in from the 972 on our Air Comfort Service text line. It says, now that Kyrou's evolving, why don't we put him with Thomas and make that the pair? Here's why. Because what they're missing for that line with Robert Thomas is the role that they deem necessary, and that's a pure sniper. And I don't know if Jordan Kyrou falls into that conversation yet. Now, I know he leads the team in goals, but when you think of Jordan Kyrou, he's not the Mikko Rantanen where he's got that one-time shot. He's not that dangerous shot. We've seen Jordan Kyrou miss opportunities to score goals.
Kyrou's as much a distributor as he is a scorer, if we're being honest.
Kyrou's a Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
I mean, Mitch Marner's a 100-point player, and Kyrou, you hope to get to that point.
And it's why, just on that point, it's why I think Rantanen actually makes more sense. If they do decide to dive into the deep end this offseason and say, hey, we're going to try to like really go for a star, I'll take either. Yeah. But if you had to tell me, hey, you got to choose one or the other, which one fits more with this Blues team? It's not Marner. Marner's too much similar to what you already have. I think it would be Rantanen.
And that's why I think they're high on Jimmy. That's not why I think. That's why they're high on Jimmy Snuggerud. That is a pure sniper. The same was the case with Vladimir Tarasenko. So why don't they try Jordan Kyrou with Robert Thomas? They do at times, but it's because that's all they have. What the ideal scenario is Jordan Kyrou is that secondary scoring option, much like a Jake Gensel is for the Tampa Bay Lightning. When Kucherov and Braden Point aren't scoring, that's where you turn to a Jake Gensel. They need somebody to be that lethal goal scorer with Robert Thomas, which is something they're going to be lacking until they go out and find it.
I would also add this to our conversation yesterday about Jake Gensel and the comparison between he and Jordan Kyrou. I think some of this is just, man, we expect too much out of $8 million players. Because that's the Blues' highest paid player. That does not mean that they are in the same category of the legitimately elite level talent that gets $12+ million a year.
Well, with the cap going up, the $8 million player is essentially a $6 million player.
Yeah, it's what Braden Shen used to be. Mm-hmm. And Braden Shen, for the most part here in St. Louis, was viewed as a second-line player. That's what he should have been, right? You think about like Colton Parayko at the beginning of the year, $6.5 million player, Justin Falk, Torrey Krug. These are second pair defensemen for the most part when they were paid what they were paid. And so if you look at it with Thomas or Kyrou or Buchnevich, like they're all roughly $8 million players. I think that's going to be the elite second line players will start to make that. And so the Blues are paying those guys accordingly with the players that are their peers. I think they're fine in terms of that money. Now, the Booch one is a little different than the Kyrou and the Thompson conversations, but they're performing at what they're being paid. What the Blues continue to be missing is what the Cardinals continue to be missing, which is that true elite level superstar. And those guys are not easy to find. It is hard to talk about every day, but it's true. Yeah. The players that we're watching that are on the top lines at the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, that's what you need. Yeah. That's what you need. Now go get it. And yeah, it's super easy for me to say and much, much harder for Doug Armstrong to do. But that's the next thing that they
And part of me really wonders if before the Blues go out there and are aggressive to find that player, they're going to wait to find out if Jimmy Snuggerud's that player. I mean, whether you believe it or not, and it might take a couple of years, but Snuggerud's doing what very few college hockey players do, and that's put up 25-plus goals.
I would say don't wait for that. Hope that he becomes that and have another guy that's already that while he's developing. Yeah. So now I have Jimmy Snuggerud. I have Jordan Kyrou. I have, let's call it in this scenario, Mikko Rantanen. I have Jake Neighbors. I have Pavel Buchnevich. I have a bunch of dudes that are lining up and down the wings. Now I've got something. I've got Dylan Holloway, who I didn't even mention. Like now you're looking at the lineup and suddenly everything falls into place. And I've got extras that now become trade bait for a potential center that can play on that third line for us as Dvorsky is in there and Thomas is in there. Okay, now it makes sense to me. But that would be the way that I would approach it because I think we've seen with the growing pains for guys like Zach Bolduc or even really Philip Broberg, honestly. Broberg got off to a great start but has started to slack back down. I have no questions about him. I think he's a really good player, but that's what you expect from young guys. Yeah. So don't expect him to come in and immediately be that top-line player that the Blues have been lacking. I think that's asking probably a little too much too early from some.
That's why the trade deadline and the offseason are going to be ideal because if they can move off of some of these larger contracts, it does give you the opening to go out there and aggressively pursue one of these players.
He's Alex, it's T-Bone, I'm BK. Junk Drawer coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. How you feeling today? Are you feeling like you have the same energy that you did 5, 10, 15 years ago? If you don't, it could be due to low testosterone. They can help you out, find out exactly where your levels are at Victory Men's Health. Their goal is to unlock your inner champion. They can do that for you. They've done it for me. That means different things for different people. Maybe I'm a runner. You guys know that. So they can do vitamin infusions. It helps you out before or after a race. Maybe you're somebody that wants to go over there, check out their red light therapy programs, or you just want to learn exactly where you're at with all of your levels. They can do a micronutrient lab test as well over at Victory Men's Health. So check them out today. Different people have different things when it comes to what it looks like to unlock your inner champion. They'll find out what that means for you. Book that first appointment online at victorymenshealth.com. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and the process is incredibly easy. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and then tell them a little bit about yourself, what it is that you would like to do to unlock your inner champion. It's all available for you at Victory Men's Health and online at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. Hey, with Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Time to dive into the junk drawer. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
Guys, I saw this on Twitter yesterday, and apparently somebody with Bleacher Report was walking around, and they were like asking fans, like, hey, who's your favorite team? And they would say, I'm an Eagles fan, or I'm a Cowboys fan.
Where was this at?
Where at? I don't know.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were saying like they're at a game, an event, if they were at the Four Nations face-off, something like that.
I don't know where they were. They were just walking around and they're asking a question. And don't even ask the follow-up question for when I bring up the second part because I never saw the number for this.
Fair enough.
But it is an interesting question of, okay, so you're a fan of the Cowboys. Do you think the Cowboys will win the Super Bowl in 2026? Oh, maybe I don't. And they said, we'll pay you to get a tattoo on your back right shoulder that says Super Bowl champions 2026 Dallas Cowboys. And they went across and they asked a couple fans. There was an Eagles fan. He wouldn't do it. There was a Chiefs fan. He wouldn't do it. There was a Giants fan.
You got good odds if you're a Chiefs fan to do it.
But a Cowboys fan said, I will do it. And he took the money and he got the tattoo. 2026 Super Bowl champions Dallas Cowboys. What would it take for you guys to look into the future, X amount of money, and say, like for BK, Missouri Tigers, college football champions 2026.
A lot of money because that's not
Alex
happening.
Blue Stanley Cup champions.
2028.
2027 probably.
2030.
Whoa.
Especially if we're waiting on Snugger and divorce.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 6 digits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to do it for less.
Oh. Where is it on my back? So like,
yeah, it's like right shoulder blade.
Yeah.
10
5
grand.
digits. Yeah, 5
Give
digits.
me a good vacation out of it. I'm down.
It's got to be 5 digits so that I can use it for something.
Yeah, let me pay for a good vacation or to renovate my basement, something like that. If I can get something clearly like I'm trading this for that, I'd do it. Now, if it doesn't take me a whole lot.
Now, if it's always visible, then it's got to be 6 digits or higher.
Neck tat?
Or your arm. Yeah, if I have to show, if this is on my back.
Alex just has a blue note right here.
It's just a blue note. I'll do that.
And then you'd have to answer questions about it all the time. What's that blue thing on your neck? Yeah. Well, see, I got paid to put a 2030 blue Stanley Cup champ.
There was a time, and I don't remember when it was, 10 years ago maybe, where people were getting paid to put logos of companies on their foreheads, tattoos. They were doing it for 10 grand. I'm like, what? No way.
I need more than that.
Yeah, we're talking millions if it's going to be on my forehead.
I saw the other day somebody on the text line mentioned, hey, you guys could get 10 grand and just pay for them to remove it down the road. Did you guys see how much Pete Davidson is paying to remove all of his tattoos?
Well, and I have to imagine, too, there's probably legal stuff into it that if you put it on, you can't remove it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if this is something that Bleacher Report is doing, they're just doing it for the clicks, so they just want the initial thing. They don't really care what you do afterwards.
Yeah.
Once
Pete Davidson was
done.
just dumb to do it all himself, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, I think he's paying hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And you know how painful that is, too?
I was going to say,
I had a buddy who had some
really
removed,
painful.
and he said it's 100 times worse than getting the tattoo.
200 different tattoos Pete Davidson has had to get removed. Yeah. Or he's in the process of getting them removed.
Yeah, and that's why I wouldn't do it. It would take a significant amount of money for me to do that.
I always wanted a tattoo. I want a sleeve.
Dude, I did too, but I can never come up with a design that would work. Plus, I don't have the money to do a sleeve.
I've never had interest in a tattoo.
I've always wanted a tattoo.
I wouldn't do this. I don't think there's an amount of money I would do it for.
I came close to it when our first daughter was born, Adelaide. I was like, okay, because now I have something that I can get a tattoo, and I just never followed through with it. But I've always wanted one. I've just never decided what would be worth tattooing on my body.
I'm with you. The only thing that I would care enough to get tattooed on me is my son.
Mm-hmm.
It's something related to him, whether it's birthday or something like that, right? But I don't know what the design would look like. No. That's what I would want, though. I would want left arm fully sleeved. Right. That's what I would be interested in.
Yeah, I've always wanted a sleeve too.
To it, and then when I'm 75 years old, I'm old and saggy, and I don't look great.
And I feel like if you get a sleeve, you got to have a beard at all times. Huh. I feel like you can't pull off a sleeve with the baby
that's
face.
The other thing. I don't know that
that's probably true.
Not exactly the biggest, toughest, meanest guy in the world. So
yeah, but it does raise the toughness bar when you put it on.
I was questioning how well you would handle the pain tolerance of a full sleeve.
You got to break it up.
You could do.
You got to break it up. You don't sit there the whole time.
I couldn't do it.
It would be done over time.
I never come up with a design cool enough, so I'm like, no, I just won't do it.
Yeah, if anybody in the YouTube chat wants to put together a design, maybe me or Alex will use it for a sleeve. You
totally.
Be the ones that design
and also probably Venmo me 15 grand so I can afford the sleeve.
I don't think it's that much, but yeah, a little bit.
We could just buy the ones that you put on and make it look like you got a tattoo.
That's what I did at first when I got my earrings in high school. I did the clip-on things to find out, do I like this? Do I actually want to invest in this? And then I
thought you were saying when you first got it.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying when you first got the earrings, you actually wore a tattoo arm sleeve to high school. Just to see what people really thought. I was like, wow,
I did the
that is
clip-ons
dedication.
first because I was like, I need to decide if I actually want to go all in on this. And then I had them up until once I got engaged, I decided I don't think 20 years from now I'm going to want to have earrings in my pictures for all of this stuff that we're paying a bunch of money for. So I decided to get rid of that, decided to get some hair, decided to grow a beard.
We tried to make a bet on the golf course with my cousin. Well, we've, of course, had adult beverages. If my cousin lost, he would get a nose piercing. And he backed out with 2 holes to go, and he lost. And, man, I would have loved if he had to get a nose piercing.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, was it going to be the bowl?
No, it was just going to be one of those studs on the nose. Sure. And he works in a financial business office where he approves loans. It's that's going to look awful.
Doesn't feel like this fits.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into some NFL quick hitters. But next, how much would the Cardinals' projection change if Quinn Mathews became this kind of player in 2025? We'll tell you who that is next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So earlier today, I was reading a really good write-up over on FanGraphs. They put out their top 100 prospects earlier today, Alex, and I really like this list. I think some of them are better than others, if we're just being honest. Everybody has their own personal preference, and I think FanGraphs does a really good job. Eric Longenhagen, who I'm hoping to get on the show later on this week, is one of the best, in my opinion, in the business. So he put out his top 100 prospects, and he's got Quinn Mathews all the way up at number 32 on his list. Quinn Mathews is rising up the ranks on a lot of these. I think this is the highest that I've seen anybody have them on their top 100 prospects list, though. And his write-up on Quinn Mathews I thought was really interesting. So he basically went into how he's buying in, obviously, based on that rankings, to what Mathews has done with his change in his arsenal and just how much he's buying into the velocity, especially. He finished it up by saying this. None of his change in velocity has had any kind of a detrimental impact on his command or his mechanical look. He's still super smooth as an operator who takes a consistent direct line to the plate, and he fills the zone with strikes. He's on pace to do what Tanner Bybee did in Cleveland. Race to the big leagues in a mid-rotation capacity after looking like the most vanilla of back-end starters just a year prior, end quote. Alex, the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because we're all excited about Quinn Mathews as well. He had a great interview that he did on TMA last week, and just frankly, his stuff plays in a way that most Cardinal starters do not. He led the minor leagues last year in strikeouts. He also is a guy that has this enormous ability to just throw innings, which is what the Cardinals have been paying $15 million a year to other guys over the past few years for. If Quinn Mathews does become Tanner Bybee, starter for the Cleveland Guardians, and I think he's more comparing it to like the way that they reached the big leagues, not necessarily their ceiling when they got there, but let's set that aside and be reckless for a second.
Yes.
What does that do for the Cardinals? Because Tanner Bybee, the way that he got to the big leagues was he basically had last year's version of Quinn Mathews, started 5 more games in AAA the next year, and then boom, big league starter from then on. It's possible that's what Quinn Mathews ends up doing. What would that do to your projection for the Cardinals if he becomes Tanner Bybee, who in his first season with the Cleveland Guardians had a 3.0 ERA?
For this season, what does it do for me?
Sure, this season and beyond.
This season specifically, I think you now at least enter the conversation of potentially fighting for a wild card spot, because where I'm most skeptical is your pitching. And I think you've got, with beyond Sonny Gray, a ton of average guys and maybe a couple that are below average. If you're giving me this, who was the runner-up in the Rookie of the Year voting in his first year, that immediately gives you a 1-2 punch that everybody can get on board with. And beyond, well, now you've entered the conversation of potentially having a star on the pitching side of things. Not saying you don't already, because I think Sonny Gray is a star on a lot of people's lists, but you've got a controllable star for a long period of time. And your pitching, in your pitching side of things, if I'm the Cardinals, I look at this and say, cool, now we just build around this. If we've got Palante, who's a middle of the rotation guy, we've got McGreevy, Graceffo, Tink, Hentz, let's hope 1 or 2 of those guys are good. Now we just got to go find one more dude in that rotation. So this makes the refresh a lot fresher if Quinn Mathews becomes this for you.
Yeah, I think this kind of, if he develops into him, I think what that does is it lifts the ceiling on this team, right? Because when I look at the lineup, we talk about it all the time. And, you know, if you get a healthy Contreras, you've got a guy that you know you can write and pen what he is. If you get an Arenado bounce back, or you get 2 of the young guys to end up hitting their stride, now you got a legitimate lineup. But when you then look at the pitching, then it comes down to, okay, well, how do you view it? And I kind of agree with Alex. Right now you've got Sonny Gray and then a whole bunch of like, this is okay. This is fine. But if you get Quinn Mathews to develop into a Bybee and he can slot in, I mean, that's a number 2 starter, or a 1B if you want to look at him that way. Now everybody's in their spot where they should be. Because right now they're asking whether it be Palante or Fetty to be a number 2, and I don't think that's in their range of outcomes. I think Fetty's probably a number 3. I think Palante, best case scenario, is a number 3. Worst case scenario is probably a number 4 for you in a rotation. And then Madsen, Michaelis are back-end starters. But if you can get Quinn Mathews to develop into that guy, now you got a 1-2 punch, which can work if you did get to October. If not, it provides stability and provides upside for this rotation. And then it comes down to the offense. But I think the rotation's the thing that can potentially really lift the ceiling on this Cardinals team. And if he can get to that spot.
Sorry, BK, real quick. If that's the case, to me, next year you're looking for a number 3.
I totally agree. I was just going through that. That's what I was curious about, because in this scenario that we've presented here, and this requires Sonny to stay. He has to be interested in continuing to be a part of this. But Sonny's year 1, Quinn's year 2, Palante 4, McGreevy 5. You're kind of missing that middle portion of your rotation. It's possible that ends up being a Tink Hentz. It's possible you have somebody in the system, a Cooper Jerpy. Like, there are guys that can potentially build into that. It's just more of a projection right now than really believing it. And you could find 3s on the open market, man. Like, next year, there's going to be somebody. Sure, it could be Fetty. I would like to upgrade from him if possible. Fair. But even if you can't, like, There are ways that you can do that. You could trade for somebody. You could go out and find somebody via free agency. Like, there are ways. That looks the part of a pretty good rotation. Not elite, but a pretty good rotation. Like, that looks as good as what the Brewers throw out there on a consistent basis.
It kind of screams what 2013 was. Once you saw Milwaukee's emergence in the postseason, you were like, oh, damn, I didn't know we had this. And then the following season, you had Adam Wainwright, who was your number one, Lance Lynn, who was like a 2-3 for you, and then you brought in a Michael Wacha, and you were like, damn, this guy could be that pitcher for us. Like, it screams a little bit of what they had when they were still in that contending mode, and it was because you had your ace, and you needed to make sure you developed the next big thing. And unfortunately for Wacha, it just didn't last a couple of years.
I think the biggest thing that this would do is it would change the narrative on the Cardinal system. Because fans would then start to have, I believe at least, maybe I'm misrepresenting this, but a little more faith that the system can produce homegrown talent. Not just position players, but also on the pitching side of things. And that's what they've been lacking. They really just have not produced above average starters at the big league level since Flaherty. I mean, Palante's the closest thing you've had. He's getting close to being there if he's not already. But since then, I mean, you really are. Dakota Hudson was that for like a year.
I was going to say Martinez was that for like 1 year.
Yeah, Carlos definitely was in this category. But Jack probably would be the closest thing that you've got to this in the last 5 to 7 years. Yeah. You really need to get back to that. That's how teams can sustain this winning. Now, you can get away with it if you're New York or if you're LA, where you just go buy all of the starters in your rotation. The Cardinals cannot. They can't do that. It's just too expensive. So you need to develop somebody that can legitimately start a game 1, 2, or 3 of a playoff series, and you feel good about them going up against whoever it is that they're going up against on any given day. Quinn Mathews has the potential to be that as soon as this season, and that's huge for this team.
Maybe this is super Debbie Downer of me, and if it is, I apologize, but that does put the Cardinals in a interesting spot, because if you do develop that, but yet you struggle to develop that star on the position player side of things, I do feel like it puts a little bit more pressure on the Cardinals to be like, hey, this isn't a rebuild anymore. This is a quick transition to where you just developed a star, and now go out and spend some money to go fix your position player side of things.
That's the thing, man. I know it feels so far away right now, and I get it. But this is why I have always pushed back against the idea that the Cardinals should rebuild. Because if you add in a number 2 starter from within, which feels hard to do, and it is, but if Quinn Mathews becomes that guy, okay, well, now you're looking at a 1-2 in the rotation. That changes some things for you. If you look at the way that you've got your roster developed lineup-wise, we're kind of missing a middle-of-the-order bat, but otherwise, like Contreras can be one of those guys. Somebody could or should or probably will emerge this year. Somebody. I don't know who. I can't tell you who right now. Out of Gorman and Nootbaar and Donovan and Walker and all of the Burleson. You got like Herrera, 6 or 7 outs to potentially become a 5-hole hitter or a 2-hole hitter for you, right? And now you look at the market and you're like, okay, we've got our 1-2 starter. We've got our lineup kind of around what that number 3-hole hitter is for us. You go out and get it, whether it's Kyle Tucker or Vlad Guerrero Jr. or the next unhappy star with where they're at. Suddenly, boom, you're hitting the ground running, and going into 2026, you have a roster that appears to be ready to compete. It's a lot of ifs and maybes and possibilities. Yes, that's how it is. That's where you're at right now as an organization. But once one thing in Quinn Mathews does work out for you, it really does change the outlook for everything. Where you're at.
I'll give the Cardinals this, and I told you this in the office, BK, before the show. They have exciting players that can grasp my attention pretty quick this season. But much like the Blues, as exciting of the players are, if you see just a little spark but no flame really gets started, it's going to be hard for me to buy into it, because you're still far away if you can't develop one of those stars.
Yeah, you've got to develop a star or go get them. You got to be willing to spend on them, and that they're really freaking expensive. I mean, it's going to be $300 million to go get one of those guys that we're talking about.
And that's why I'd give the slight edge to the Blues.
But you can do that if you develop one of the. It's basically it's this thing. You're probably going to have to pay for one of them. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to pay for a star position player. You're going to have to pay for a front-end starting pitcher. At this point, they're both super expensive. And one's a better investment than the other typically. The position player is more stable. Yeah. They're less prone to be injured. They're less likely to go fluctuating year to year on their results. Like, position players are just sturdier year to year. They're more stable. I'd rather spend on that. So that makes Quinn Mathews that much more important. But, dude, if you can develop both of those things and then go out and spend on something else, woo, now we're cooking with gas. It's just a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask for you to develop a number 2 starter and a star player within the same calendar year. But if they did, I wouldn't be upset about it. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, time for some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Ted Drew's. That's right, the famous St. Louis tradition since 1929, that frozen custard. It is now officially open daily. And you're probably thinking, Alex, it's freezing outside. Why do I want a frozen custard? Because you always want something that tastes delicious, and that is Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. Fourth generation family-run business, has been built on quality service and love for St. Louis. It's a year-round tradition. No matter if it's cold outside, you get to come out there, enjoy the concrete, represent St. Louis, and you get to build some family traditions. I get to love doing this with my daughters. Friday nights are Ted Drew's nights, where we go out, we just spend time, talk about the week, and enjoy time together. So make sure you get your chance to do that with your family and friends as well. Plus, they've got plenty of flavors if you want to celebrate Mizzou, potentially, as BK likes to point out, making a run for the Elite Eight. Go get the Terra Mizzou, Ted's secret blend of chocolate and pistachio nuts, served as a concrete or a sundae. And when you get there, walk across the parking lot, check out their gift shop. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So earlier today over on ESPN.com, they put together a list of the best potential fits for free agents. You want to go through some of these, Alex?
Oh, yeah. I'm ready to swipe left.
All right, so.
Is that good?
No,
or bad?
that's bad.
Damn it.
You're going to get this right eventually.
Maybe.
You'll remain single like me.
T.
Just
Higgins
swipe
is
left.
considered to be the best wide receiver and the best free agent available this offseason. Here's the problem. He's probably not going to become available. It was announced yesterday, reported by somebody in Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals are very likely to franchise tag him.
Oh, boo!
It's possible they end up trading him because they don't come to terms with T. Higgins, but they're likely to franchise tag him. So keep that in mind as we're talking about this. They said the best team fit for T. Higgins is...
Washington Commanders.
Yep, Washington Commanders.
That was easy.
Commanders could pair Higgins with Terry McLaurin to give Jaden Daniels a true two difference makers on the perimeter.
If you're Washington, why wouldn't you trade this year's first-round pick for him?
I'd do it.
I mean, what is a 23rd, fourth pick?
Lord, man.
What does that do for your team that needs to win now and you need to fix your offense?
29th overall selection.
Okay, I would trade that in a heartbeat to Cincinnati.
I'll be honest, I don't think it's going to take that much.
Really?
I think they could trade their second and third round pick and get him.
Man, but...
I mean, think about Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill didn't even get a first round pick.
but I'm thinking for how vocal Joe Burrow has been about keeping him, I think you got to make a trade that makes it look like you're trying.
If they can't get a deal done with him, they can't have him on the contract on the books for $30 million this year, man. They've got too much other stuff that they've got to do.
Yeah.
Like, it's $30 million, and that's not spread out cap hit wise. That's all of it guaranteed for this year. Boom. 15% of your cap going to T. Higgins in 2025.
If I'm Washington, I would do whatever it takes to trade for him.
I'm with you.
I like the Washington fit. I also like the idea of New England going out and making a move, giving Drake May a supporting cast.
They're tougher, though, because if it does end up, if Washington says, screw it, spend the 29th overall pick, it becomes really tough for the Patriots because they're fourth. You're not sending that
If
one
I'm
there.
the Patriots, I'm instead doing everything I can to draft Travis Hunter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess
Trade to get the
there.
second or third overall pick because that's hopefully my T. Higgins going into next year.
There are a lack of blue chips in this class. Would you consider, if you're the Patriots, sending the 4th overall pick to Cincinnati for the 17th overall pick and T. Higgins? So you're basically moving down. You retain your first-round selection, but you get T. Higgins in return.
Yeah, I mean,
But you're moving down 13 spots. Big jump.
They've got issues, I think, on the offensive line just as much as they do to get weapons for Drake May. But I think I could still get a decent offensive lineman and I get a number one wide receiver. So, yeah, I think I would do that.
Yeah.
I would love to do that if I'm them.
I'd be all in on that because you're right. I think you can trade down, you get a number one wide receiver, and you also will probably still have a spot to where you can draft an offensive lineman. And if they're not there at
Spend
17,
money.
I'll just trade that pick again, and I'll continue to trade down and accumulate
Yeah,
assets.
and if
money
I'm
in
the
the
Bengals,
offseason.
that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trading up to number 4, and then I
trading.
continue trading down and just accumulating more assets to fill some of the roster holes that we've got on our
We should
team.
be a GM.
We should.
Like trio as a
easy.
GM.
All right,
Well,
next
we would
thing up
never
here.
agree on roster
Are
decisions.
you kidding me? We always agree on things.
They went to Sam Darnold at 6th overall. Best team fit for him is, any guesses?
I saw the list, so I know the answer.
I think there's one that makes a lot of sense.
My guess would be the Giants or Vegas.
You're correct on one of those.
We can only pick one team.
I'll go Vegas.
Yep. Vegas
That makes
Raiders
sense.
is their best fit. With the transition to Coach Pete Carroll and offense coordinator Chip Kelly, the Raiders could finally solve their quarterback issues in free agency by signing Sam Darnold. Vegas was 30th last year in QBR. Darnold's 4,300 passing yards for the Vikings last year, ranked 5th in the league. Vegas has Kelly now, who could scheme up Darnold's arm talent while also using his mobility to attack the edges of the field. That would be a really interesting fit, man. I don't know if it would work or not. I am very skeptical on Sam Darnold.
Be a disaster.
He's in a really good situation in Minnesota, and I don't think it's going to be as good in Vegas. But
Who's catching the football from Sam Darnold?
Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, and that's all.
Okay, Brock Bowers, cool. I'm on board with. But you do not have Justin Jefferson on that team.
I'm with
And
you.
that's what I think made Sam Darnold look so good.
I'm with you. I don't think it. I don't know that they have an alternative, though. And this is where things get tough. If you're the Raiders, I've got to get somebody to fill that position. And if it's not Sam Darnold, my options are incredibly limited, man. Like, I'm Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. Am I really going down that path? Sam Darnold is pretty clearly the best option this year available, either in free agency or trade. I guess you could do Rodgers, but, like, that's not inspiring. I would rather do Sam Darnold than Rodgers.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a great fit for him specifically, right? Because like what you said, I 100% agree with you.
Can I give you one that I think is actually pretty interesting?
Is it the one I'm thinking?
Where's it at?
I don't know.
Where's yours?
Pittsburgh?
That's who I was
that's
thinking.
not what I was thinking.
That's who I was thinking.
I could see
It's
that
the one
though.
place that I think could maybe work for him.
And I actually was thinking Seattle, but Geno's got one more year on
Yeah.
that contract. But who gives you a better chance to win in Seattle, Darnold or Geno Smith?
I think they're similar. I would stick with Geno just because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
I was thinking Jets. Go back and dip right back into what he
They
was.
can't do that.
And that would be terrible.
You have to turn the page. You have to turn the page if you're them. Like, go to the next era of Jets football. They're probably going to be really bad this year. The first move you make, if you're Aaron Glenn, cannot be bringing back a guy that was a disaster and said, I'm seeing ghosts on national television in a Jets uniform. It can't happen.
The only reason I say that is because when I think of their weapons, I go, okay, I can kind of see it. Because, I mean, you got the wide receiver, why am I drawing blank? Wilson out there. And then you've got their running back. So, like, you've got the pieces that you would need potentially for him to have some success. If you go out and you add another draft, like a solid number 2 wide receiver to help him out, like, I can see how they try and emulate the formula Minnesota did. But, I mean, you're right. It's a tough sell on how you do it, even though I feel like that is, like, if we're going team fit for Sam Darnold, to me, that is the best one.
Yeah, I still would go Pittsburgh. I think the offensive line's better. And I think that's a huge part of Sam Darnold's success. Beyond just what he has at wide receiver, which was huge for him in Minnesota, no doubt. The offensive line play was actually really good there. And Pittsburgh has a better O-line than what the Jets do, so I think he has fewer opportunities to see ghosts in the pocket if he ends up going to Pittsburgh. I don't know that there's an ideal fit. It's Minnesota, but they have an alternative in place.
Yeah.
It's cheap. It's young, cost controlled. They drafted him in the first round for a reason.
Sam
JJ
Darnold.
McCarthy's their answer.
Sam Darnold unfortunately set himself up for disappointment on the actual performance side of things. He's going to get a hell of a load of money, which is going to be good for him. But the narrative of Sam Darnold is about to be dragged through the mud.
All right, last thing that I wanted to get to here. There was another piece on ESPN from Bill Barnwell, who does really good work for them, breaks everything down in every possible way that you can. We mentioned the weapons that may or may not be there in Vegas. Well, there are potentially a lot of wide receivers that could be on the move this offseason. He broke down a few of them. Trade candidates, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel. If you were another team, would you be interested in trading in either of those two guys? Those were the 2 trade candidates at the receiver position that he had.
I wouldn't. Unless I'm a team that has a good foundation in place to where I feel like I can win. I think Tyreek Hill, although an incredible player, is, as we've seen with Miami, a nightmare in terms of...
I would trade for Tyreek. If I'm Washington and I can't get T. Higgins...
Ooh, gosh. That's a
Give me Tyreek
disaster
Hill.
for my young quarterback.
I still think Tyreek can play, man. And I think all his frustrations, it's just because, I mean, he truly, when he said it, like, hey, this is the first time I missed it's truly the first time he's missed the playoffs. I think it just was heat of the moment. I mean, you can question his leadership. I think that's a little fair.
From what I understand, the guys inside of the locker room really love Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. And, like, if they win, like, it's not a problem.
I can speak to Miami, but I know in Kansas City that was the case.
In Washington, if you add him, you're going to be winning football games. And I still think he can play. So I would say Tyreek. I question if Debo can.
I wouldn't do Debo. He's injured.
Debo looked terrible this year. So
I wouldn't trade for him. I'd say
Hill,
go ahead
would.
and cut him because I'll sign him to a cheap contract in free agency, but I'm not trading for that guy. I have no reason to. I love Deebo Samuel. He's one of my favorite players when he's right. He just wasn't right last year.
Yeah.
I can't believe that he's going to be right without seeing it for my own eyes. All right, cut candidates that he had here. Devontae Adams was one. He's a really intriguing player on free agency.
Boy, that went south quick, didn't it?
Christian Kirk is another. Cooper Kupp is expected to be cut by the LA Rams. Tyler Lockett with the Seahawks. Do you guys think that any of those 4 are particularly interesting for a specific situation? So Devontae Adams, Christian Kirk, previously with the Jags, was hurt most of this year. Cooper Kupp or Tyler Lockett.
If I'm Buffalo,
a little long in the tooth.
I'm targeting Devontae Adams.
That's a good one.
I got my slot dude in
Hadn't thought
Shakir.
about that.
I'm going.
Sure do like
I'm
it.
going my big dude down south that I can throw the ball to. So if I'm Buffalo, I'm targeting Devontae Adams for everything.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that one, but that is a good one. I was thinking with Devontae Adams, because I had seen something out there kind of connecting, was the Chargers. I like the idea of the Chargers with Devontae Adams, got McConkey as well. Now you're looking at kind of a 1-2 punch for Justin Herbert. I like the LA Chargers, but I didn't even think of Buffalo because that one is a really good fit as well.
All right, you guys went with Devontae Adams. I like him back in Green Bay. I just love the symmetry of it all, like going back to Green Bay.
It's a good one, too.
They need a number 1 wide receiver. They could clearly see, hey, both of us are better with the other.
Yeah.
It's better for us to be together than apart. That's the spot that I would really love to see him. But if I'm going with a different player, Christian Kirk is just a player that I've always really liked. I thought he got unjustly criticized because he got that massive contract from the Jaguars. Not his fault somebody paid him, man.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's about to go through that.
Exactly. It's not his fault. Somebody handed me a bag of money. What am I supposed to say? No.
I'm going to stay in Minnesota for the league minimum.
He's a good player, but not a great one. I actually think he makes sense for another team that has a player on this list of being a cut candidate. I think he could be really interesting in LA with the Rams. He's a pure slot receiver the way that Cooper Kupp was. Now, that might be a little too much over the middle, but they made it work with Kupp and Nakua. I think they could make it work potentially with Christian Kirk and Puka Nakua as well.
I would
really
say
like
plan for Cooper Kupp to be a Kansas City Chief.
I hope not. I don't want that. I would rather have one of the other guys that's potentially hitting free agency, like Stephon Diggs. Let's go ahead and get a Stephon Diggs bounce back year in Kansas City.
Stephon Diggs is hitting free agency?
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah, he's hitting the free agents this year at the receiver position. Keenan Allen, Hollywood Brown, Brandon Cooks, Amari Cooper.
He's not good in Buffalo.
I don't know if he can play
Stephon Diggs. Chris Godwin. I don't think he's leaving Tampa.
Yeah,
I'd be shocked if he's not leaving Tampa. And then other guys that could potentially either be available via trade candidate or free agents. Adam Thielen, Mike Williams, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster. Some decent players there as well.
You just listed 3 Kansas City Chiefs.
What I heard was a whole bunch of old dudes.
Yeah, they're going to need some wide receivers out in KC.
Any of those pique your interest?
Yeah.
Godwin, if he's available, but that's not happening.
What would be your ideal Godwin landing spot? Big slot.
Yeah.
Production over the middle.
Baltimore?
That's what I was thinking.
Kind of thought Devontae to Baltimore as well for those Lamar's YOLOs downfield.
Yeah, he likes targeting the middle of the field.
Yeah.
I would love to see him in Baltimore.
Yeah.
The other spot that I would like is Houston. I don't know that they could do it, but CJ Stroud throwing to him I think would be a lot of fun. Have him play in that role that they were otherwise expecting for like Diggs this year, Tank Dell this year.
It's weird. I want the big free agents to go to the AFC. I want the AFC to load up. I don't know why.
Can I give you one other? I think Chris Godwin in Denver would be really interesting.
Yeah. They need something for Bo Nix.
That's one of their biggest things. They need a running back and they need a big-time slot receiver. I actually think Denver, I would not like the signing for them, but Denver feels like a spot that Cooper Kupp could land in. I could see that, where they're looking for a wide receiver that's just ready-made, plop him into the lineup, and boom, we know we're getting 800 yards this year.
That might be a Christian Kirk spot, too, or a Tyler Lockett. Any of those guys.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Denver's one of the teams that I'm most interested in this offseason because they're not too far away. They're interesting.
I don't know what this team has in cap space, but I could see where like they're missing a number 2 guy and they just drafted their number 1. What about Arizona?
I could see that.
And they're intriguing because, like, they were fun this year. They were ahead of schedule, I'd say.
They were fun for the first half, and then the second half, Kyler Murray just checked out. And that's why I'd be worried.
That's fair. But Marvin Harrison's, like, you can tell, like, he's clearly number 1, but he's going to need...
They've got a real legit tight end.
Yeah, and they're going to need a Robin to their Batman. And I don't know if you really want to make your tight end that guy. He's more like the Batmobile. But I think
like
Godwin
Alfred.
could make sense. Oh, yeah, 100%. And he doesn't catch touchdowns. I would say like Godwin, if you said pick a spot for him, Arizona would be kind of fun to put him there.
I like that.
Who's Dallas going to go after?
They don't have any money. They can't go after anybody. They can barely re-sign their own guys.
They're going to trade Micah Parsons.
Yeah, okay, well, if they do that, they could go ahead and trade Micah Parsons for somebody. Like, trade Micah for Tyreek Hill. There, boom. You got it. There's your Dallas Cowboys offseason.
Man, that is a Jerry Jones move
Ryan
I've ever seen.
Schottenheimer, ladies and gentlemen.
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, what are the roster spots that are actually up for grabs this spring? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to start putting your futures bets in. You can do that for baseball if you want to. You can do it for the NCAA tournament if you want to as well, and that's what I'm focusing on here. Mizzou's got a big game tomorrow night against Alabama. I actually really like Alabama's odds to win the national title this year. 10-1 over on Circa, 9.5-1 if you made that exact same bet over on FanDuel. And Alex, this is why we bet exclusively on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. Auburn, 3.5-1 over on Circa, plus 330 over on FanDuel. Wisconsin, who's got a big game tonight against Illinois, 50-1 to win the Natty over on Circa, 35-1 over on FanDuel. You're winning more money when you bet with Circa.
I'm putting together my parlay for Thursday night's Four Nations Championship game. I've got Team USA on the money line. No, man, stop. Sorry. But I'm also throwing in the over at 5.5 because you put those two together, it's plus 475. You do that on other sports betting apps, plus 325. You're getting the best odds with Circa Sports Illinois. Futures, big parlays, even those individual type money line splits, Circa is there to make sure you bring home the most money possible. So download it today. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendricks here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. USA fell to Sweden last night in their final round-robin game of the Four Nations tournament, but they do advance to the championship game as they will take on Team Canada. We'll have pregame coverage starting Thursday at 6 o'clock with puck drop at 7 here on 101 ESPN. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, Alex, going into spring training, typically you've got some battles going into camp, right? Last year, the big one was in center field, and then 17 of them got hurt and ended up, hey, by default, Victor Scott, congratulations. You're the starting center fielder on opening day. I do think there are some starting nods that are potentially up for grabs here. Like center field, once again, shocker for everybody, is once again up for grabs. Not sure how much a roster spot is up for grabs there, depending on if Victor Scott ends up winning that or not. I suppose it could be, but center field, whoever starts on opening day, is up for debate. Catcher, up for debate right now. I think Ivan Herrera should be the catcher that starts on opening day, but I don't know if the Cardinals agree with that. I think it's a fair question of, hey, is Wilson Contreras starting at first base or is Alec Burleson starting at first base? The roster spot's not up for grabs, but one of them's DH, the other one's probably first base going into opening day. So I think there are some battles there. What I am interested in, though, is what are the roster battles? Because your catcher spot is done. Your infield, for the most part, in my opinion, is done. Are we talking about basically like the final spot among the position players and maybe a spot in the bullpen that's up for grabs roster-wise? Is that it?
Probably. Okay. I mean, the one position you didn't mention in terms of intrigue of position battle is right field. We're not really certain of who's going to be playing there yet. So, but yeah, I think you're talking about the 13th position player, which I would imagine is Thomas JC, but I don't know if he's making this roster.
I don't think he's going to make the roster unless he's really playing significant time. I think the guy that is most affected by Arenado is actually Thomas JC.
Which makes sense, especially when you've seen all the reports of him working out at third base, at shortstop, at second base. Like, he's getting everything. He's going super utility. But, I mean, you're talking that or one of the outfield spots in terms of that last position player. And then you're right, the bullpen arm. And the bullpen arm, I probably would say, is the bigger competition in terms of, is that a McGreevy? Is that one of these guys that we don't really know much about that could come in and be a high leverage arm? So I would say the bullpen arm is probably the bigger competition for the roster spot.
Yeah, I think the bench is the one that's going to be really determining the roster spot because, like, I mean, you mentioned Sajacy, right? Like, is he a guy that you carry on the bench, or is Mo going to view him as, like, he's said all along? And I think Kate even mentioned, like, Mo this year is still going to stand by, like, hey, if a prospect's not playing, he's going to be down in AAA. I don't necessarily have that fear because I think right now his role as a big leaguer would be on the bench. So I don't mind keeping Sajacy on the bench. Versatile guy, can play as the backup shortstop, backup third baseman, backup second baseman if need be. I'll be curious, like, what do you do with Luken Baker then too? Like, what is his role on this team? Because he has no versatility. And you mentioned first base. Well, I've got Contreras and I've got Alec Burleson, so he's third on that spot. So are you going to just carry a guy that should be a right-handed bat that can come off of your bench and could potentially match lefties? Like, I'm in on that. I actually think that is the best way to utilize a bench, not carrying a Matt Carpenter and Brandon Crawford like they did a year ago. But I think those are really the two guys that their fate will be determined in spring training. And Sajacy, it could just be as simple as, hey, this guy was one of our top prospects. We're not playing him unless he's getting every time.
I feel like the way that this team usually goes is that last position player is somebody that's never going to see the field, and they're just fine with it. Like Jose Fermin.
Hellman.
Hellman.
So I've got Victor Scott, Sajacy, Luken Baker, Fermin, Hellman as my guys that I think are battling for that final. I think it's two spots that are available on the bench right now. Because otherwise you got your two catchers, you've got five infielders, Contreras, Gorman, Wynn, Arenado, Donovan. Four potential outfielders that are ready-made, Burleson, Newt, Walker, Ciani. You can classify these guys in different ways, but that's 11 players that you've got there. You got two open spots on your bench, Victor Scott, Sajacy, Luken Baker, Fermin, Hellman. Boom, ready to go. If you had to ask me today who I think is going to make the roster, I think it's Luken Baker and then one of Fermin or Hellman. It's not super inspiring, but I would rather those guys be on the roster for that final spot and just be the paid, hey, sit on the bench, please, for the next 60 games. And let's see what we've got with these other guys. I would rather that than let Sajacy or Victor Scott rot on the bench and not play on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially on the Luken Baker. I see what his role is. It's coming off of the bench in big moments like that because he is such a big bat. For Fermin or Hellman, yeah, cool. You'll maybe see the field. You'll be the Brandon Crawford role. Well, we won't see you very often unless we do, and then BK gets frustrated. But I would take that for one of those guys that have no impact on your future. And so Thomas Sajacy is playing. The interesting thing with him is, though, are they going to put him in Memphis and have him rotate through 3 or 4 different positions? Because there's not a set position that he's going to play at the major league level. So do you send him down and you say, cool, work out at third, work out at second, short, left field, right field? You're going to be everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think right now, the only spot that Sajacy could get a start in, because I'm trying to run in my head okay, where are you getting at bats for Sajacy if he's here? Because even thinking through pinch hitting situations, who's the lefty you're taking him out for? Is it Gorman? But even Ollie said at Winter Warren, he hits lefties fairly well. So I don't know where the at bat is coming from as a pinch hitter. And if I have Baker on my bench, that guy I would almost take an at bat for. But then of course you got Sajacy's versatility to come in. It's almost just shortstop. Right? It's just the backup shortstop role because nobody else on the roster really profiles that way. And I don't even think he really profiles as a shortstop, but he can do it. And you can get away with it because it sounds like they don't want to have Donovan do it. He hadn't taken reps at shortstop in I don't know how long. And that's the only other guy that we've seen potentially do it. So that would be his role.
And then on the pitching side of things, I think these 5 guys are guaranteed to make the opening day roster. Gray, Fetty, Matz, Michaelis, Palante. You guys agree?
Yeah, agree.
Other guys that I think are potentially
Helsley,
locked to be on the roster.
Romero.
Yeah. Helsley, Fernandez, King, Liberatore, and JoJo. That's 5 more.
God, that's a lot of lefties.
That is 10 total of your 13-man pitching staff. I think Roycroft is probably going to make it to the opening day roster for you this year. Find out what he is.
I think he's probably a guarantee also.
Riley O'Brien, boom. You have 1 spot remaining for McGreevy or Graceffo or whoever it is that you want to be able to bring up to the opening day roster out of the bullpen. It's tight, man. These roster spots are really thin, and this is why, T-Bone, I know you've been saying, hey, I think that the Cardinals could go into the opening day roster with somebody that they've added from outside to be a part of that bullpen. I just don't want them to sign him because I don't think it's that big of a problem right now to, like, that you can actually fix with somebody externally, and I would just rather have the flexibility. Like, at least right now I can send down some of these guys and play that Memphis shuttle game with them throughout the course of the season. If I go sign somebody, they're locked in. They're a part of the roster. I want to be able to go up and down with Graceffo or Roycroft, some of these guys that have a little bit more flexibility for me out of the pen, because I have very little flexibility elsewhere on the roster. It's 2 spots on my bench and probably 2 spots coming out of my bullpen going into the start of the season.
Yeah, I just don't think you need that much flexibility. I mean, you ran through.
It's only 2.
I have 1 spot is where I think you just need flexibility for. I would bring in a veteran. I'm interested to see this Nick Anderson that they signed on a minor league deal who's been successful in the past. But to me, like, I don't like these bullpen arms, like they're getting excited about, oh, I can't wait to see what Roycroft and O'Brien are. Okay, but like I've seen bullpen arms. It's such a futile industry. Like, I'm okay. I don't know if we need to plan on just guaranteeing guy spots. I mean, you mentioned King as a lock, by the way. I'm not sure King is a lock.
I mean, he's making multiple millions of dollars.
He's a lock.
Definitely
I know,
a lock
but
they
got 3 lefties in the bullpen that they're carrying, which is why I don't think you'll see Steve Ametz in the
They would
bullpen.
have non-tendered him if he wasn't a lock.
And I'm surprised that they didn't non-tender him just because, like, I mean, Alex mentioned, they got a ton of lefties in that pen. And I don't
They're
know.
gonna run it back.
Good.
I'm not telling you got to like it, but
Because I don't like it,
I'm glad
Brandon.
every
they
batting
made
order.
their decision there. They've made their bed. They're going to lay in it. They're not going to just send him down to the minors to make a couple $1 million.
Have
we
some
did that with
standards.
Carlson.
Have some
That's
standards.
not happening. Cardinals roster is more locked in than you'd probably imagine, given the fact that they're in a transition.
We're not talking about them till opening day.
Locked into 75 wins.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK. Hey, coming up next, we're going to have your shot score a pair of single-session passes for the 2025 State Farm Missouri Valley Conference Men's Basketball Tournament. The MVC tournament is hitting the court, March 6th through the 9th at the Enterprise Center. All session and single-session tickets now available for Arch Madness. But coming up next, we'll give you a chance to win via the text line. So stay tuned for that during the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care who have been making people comfortable since 1926. And whether you got a brand new HVAC system or an older HVAC system, Classic Air Care is there to help that live as long as it can. And they've done that for me. I've owned a home since 2016, 2 different homes, 2 different older HVAC systems, and Classic Air Care has been taking care of that every single time. And when it comes to their phenomenal customer service, don't just believe me. Check out the 4.8 rating that they have over on Google reviews, 2,500 reviews, over 2,500 reviews that talk about that customer service, like this one from Denise. I contacted the company for a second opinion. They located the problem that the original company didn't. Sean took the pictures, wrote a detailed report of his finding. It was exactly what we needed to not be railroaded by another company. So give the company that's out to take care of you and your family a call and schedule today. Just do me a favor when you do so. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. You can schedule online, Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
Hey, that 101 ESPN app is free to download, super easy to use, and it is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. If you'd like to, you can always check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. And while you're over there, hit that subscribe button. Makes it super easy for you. At 11 a.m., you'll be able to go right in there, get in there with the Graveyard Chat. It is always lively over there, and we appreciate everybody for being a part of the show. And right now is your chance to win a pair of single-session passes for the 2025 State Farm Missouri Valley Conference. That's coming up on March 6th through the 9th at Enterprise Center. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you're texter number 101 with the correct answer to the following question, you're getting that pair of single-session passes for the 2025 State Farm MVC Tournament. Question for you today. Earlier today, Alex, during a hockey segment that we talked about, we mentioned a hockey player's nickname. A hockey player's nickname. What was that nickname? I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It is also a nickname of a basketball player that previously played with LeBron James. If you can answer that question, texter number 101 correctly, you are getting that pair of single-session passes for the MVC tournament. For Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Big show lined up for you guys tomorrow, hockey-centric. We've got Chris Kerber tomorrow at 1:30, but we will also be joined by Darren Drager, one of the best insiders in the game. He's one of the ones that had the early report on Braden Shin potentially being available and the Toronto Maple Leafs potentially being interested, saying that the offer would have to be mammoth for the Blues to be willing to listen on Shin. So we'll get the latest on that from Darren Drager when he joins us tomorrow at 11:15 here on BK and Ferrario. Wonder why we don't make like big C's out there anymore.
What?